The anime begins, introducing us to the protagonist of this story called Yu Arasaka, who is a boy with a special ability that allows him to dominate other people's bodies for a period of 5 seconds. However, his own body becomes unconscious every time he possesses someone else. For this reason, he was injured many times in the middle of his transition. In addition to this, he reveals that since he can only exchange his body with people who are in his field of vision, normally he uses his power to do mischief, such as spying on the bodies of the girls he owns, or take revenge on bullies who irritate him by provoking fights between them. But finally, he discovered the perfect way to use his superhuman ability without stopping, and Yu Arasaka takes over the body of the smartest students in his class to memorize your answers during the academy exams. In this way, he managed to climb to number 1 on his school's honor roll. Due to this, he began to present the entrance tests for the best higher academies in the city. But this is not like normal exams, since during the tests you do not know who the smartest students are. Therefore, he infiltrated different teaching academies many times while pretending to be an enrolled student. To do this, he disguised himself as a driver with ridiculous glasses to carry out an exhaustive investigation on the students. In this way, he located the most intelligent students who aspire to attend the same academy as him. As a result, he passed the entrance test for an elite higher school without any problems. Some time later during the opening ceremony, the director of this new academy introduces him to the rest of the students, who are surprised to see that Yu Arasaka is the student who obtained the best results in the entrance test. But also, they feel envy after discovering that he is extremely handsome. Meanwhile, Yu Arasaka gives a super rehearsed speech with which he manages to attract the attention of several girls at the academy. As time goes by, Yu Arasaka gains great popularity as he is considered a super attractive genius. Consequently, many girls want to go out with him and declare themselves publicly, but he rejects them with the excuse that he wants to concentrate on his studies. However, it is all a vile lie, since he is aware that he is a good-for-nothing bum, and his purpose is to conquer the most beautiful girl in the academy called Yumi Shiranagi. To achieve his goal, Yu Arasaka causes a terrible accident, where he takes over the body of Yumi's best friend and makes her flee the scene. After this, he takes over a truck driver and makes him deviate in the direction of Yumi in order to save her life and make her fall in love with him. Next, his plan goes perfectly and he accompanies Yumi to the infirmary to treat a wound on her knee. Later, Yu Arasaka tries to say goodbye to her selflessly, but Yumi stops him and invites him to eat her favorite cakes as a sign of her gratitude for saving her life. However, Yu Arasaka pretends to be interested and rejects his offer, since his purpose is to make Yumi melt for him and want him with all her might. At that moment, Yumi's best friend called Miss Himo understands that she is the third in contention in this romantic encounter, and makes the decision to leave so they can both have some time alone. After this, Yu Arasaka and Yumi head to a cafeteria to eat some pancakes. During their date, they both have a pleasant moment and Yumi falls into the trap that Yu Arasaka orchestrated from the beginning. As a result, she asks him to repeat their date the next day and walk together back home, something with which clearly Yu Arasaka feels more than satisfied to see that his plan of conquest is going perfectly. The next day at the academy, he receives a message from Yumi reminding him of their plans to visit the cafeteria together. Upon reading this, Yu Arasaka begins to laugh in a wild way that scares and attracts the attention of his classmates. At that moment, his happiness is interrupted after he is summoned to the student council room through the room's speakers. Once there, President Yoshiyuki Omura accuses him of cheating on the aptitude exam, since he suspects that he could have copied the answers. For this reason, he is required to take the exam again, unaccompanied and under his supervision at all times. Upon hearing this, Yu Arasaka thinks that this is stupid and proceeds to leave the room. However, Omura stops him and explains that the principal and vice principal of the academy granted him permission to evaluate him in such a way that if Yu Arasaka refuses to present the test he will be immediately expelled from school. Furthermore, it tells you that you must obtain a minimum of 90 points to prove your innocence. Otherwise, you will be found guilty of cheating on the exam and must leave the academy forever. That being said, Yu Arasaka has no choice but to present the evidence, so he decides to use his ability to take over Omura's body and get the answers. Unfortunately, this doesn't work as planned, since the president is looking at an adult magazine, and due to his frustration, he ends up losing his mind and tears up the magazine. After this, Yu Arasaka returns to his body and to his surprise, he was being recorded by a student from another school named Naotomori, who reveals to him that he has proof that he has the ability to take over the bodies of others. since for days he has followed him to gather information and demonstrate that Yuatasaka really is a fake. Given this, Yuatasaka responds that his strange behavior is due to a symptom of narcolepsy that makes him lose consciousness. However, now confesses that she has his medical history, and in it, there are no signs that he suffers from any illness. It is then when Yuatasaka runs out of excuses and feels between a rock and a hard place. For this reason, he prefers to play the victim and flees from the student council room to evade his responsibility for cheating. At that moment, he bumps into another student named Jijiro Takajo who claims that it is his turn to fix things. While escaping, Yuatasaka meets Yumi and tries to hold her hand to accompany him. However, she trips and falls to the ground, so Yuatasaka abandons her and continues on his way. After this, Jijiro helps Yumi and smiles because Yuatasaka gave him reasons to catch him. Next, a chase begins through the city where it is revealed that Jijiro also has special abilities, and this one has great superhuman speed that allows him to move in an uncontrolled way. However, he still cannot control his power, and as a result, he has also been injured on multiple occasions. Furthermore, he thinks his ability is flawed. Finally, Jijiro manages to catch Yuatasaka and interrogates him, but suddenly now interrupts them. At that moment, she mentions her desire for Yuatasaka to transfer to her school, since in this world there are many more people with special abilities, but those abilities are a product of puberty and disappear over time. Therefore, he suggests that he attend the Aumi Academy until his power dissipates. Furthermore, he reveals that he obtained his parents' consent. Upon hearing this, Yuatasaka refuses to follow his orders, but now responds that because of his appearance he must be quite popular, so he doesn't understand his reason for cheating and pretending to be a genius. Also, it exposes him for using his ability to conquer the girl he likes, and feels that Yuatasaka is a pathetic man for resorting to these miserable tactics to get girls' attention. Upon hearing this, Yuatasaka tries to hit her, but now quickly disappears and beats him up. At that moment, it is revealed to us that she possesses the ability to become invisible, although his power is limited only to the eyes of his opponents and he uses it as a self-defense mechanism. After this, now reaffirms his intention for Yuatasaka to join his student council committee, since his ability can be useful against those who use their powers to cause evil in this world. During the night, Yuatasaka returns home and his younger sister Ayumi Atasaka is surprised to see his disheveled appearance. So Yuatasaka calms her down and lies to her by telling her that he had an accident during his gym class. After this, Ayumi tells him that she had a fantastic conversation with her uncle, in which he confesses that they both won a scholarship to attend a special school called Aumi. Upon hearing this, Yuatasaka is surprised and deduces that now has something to do with this matter. On the other hand, Ayumi is happy to be free of rent expenses and reveals that her uncle has a surprise for them for their move. Despite this, Yuatasaka continues to disagree and asks his sister if it doesn't hurt her to separate from her friends at school. But she responds that with current technology it is possible to keep in touch with her friends over a distance. Therefore, she cannot feel alone during this new adventure. Later, Ayumi prepares an omelet with rice to cheer up Yuatasaka, although he thinks it is a child's thing. But quickly, he changes his mind to try a sweet touch in the tortilla and remembers that it tastes the same as when he was a child. After this, Ayumi tells him that she was inspired by her mother's recipe to prepare the food. So Yuatasaka responds that he doesn't care about his mother's life and is not interested in knowing anything about her. In this way, he tells us that his mother divorced and abandoned them in the care of his uncle. On the other hand, Ayumi understands his feelings, but hopes that Yuatasaka will make peace with her mother and forgive her. Furthermore, she mentions that she has the impression that they have another family somewhere else. However, he responds that they do not have a father and can only count on their mutual support. Later, they both get distracted while Ayumi observes the stars through her telescope. There, she tells him that she loves to see distant places that she can't reach, and she wonders about the fantastic things that she doesn't know about. But Yuatasaka tries to give him some advice so that he does not concentrate on always talking about the stars in his new school environment, since he fears that she will have problems adapting to an unknown school. The next day, they both move into their new apartment, and Ayumi is clearly excited about this new adventure. Later, Yuatasaka meets Yumi and confesses that he has to transfer schools. Therefore, they cannot spend more time together at school. However, in a very selfish way, he hopes that she can visit him continually to maintain their relationship. However, she responds that her new home is very far away. For this reason, he considers that it is better to separate their paths forever and not get romantically involved with each other again. After this, Yumi thanks him again for saving her life and says goodbye. As a result, Yu Arasaka is surprised by their sudden breakup and maintains his shocked face until he returns to his bedroom, where coincidentally, he meets Nao and Jijiro, who have decided to help them with the move, much to Yu Arasaka's displeasure. While they are organizing their things, Yu Arasaka observes the mysterious box that contains the gift sent by his uncle, and with great curiosity he decides to open it, only to be disappointed to discover that it is a large portion of instant ramen. On the other hand, Nao reveals her ability to Ayumi and pretends that it is a magic trick. However, Yu Arasaka reprimands her for using her ability to impress her sister. Furthermore, he tells him that if he is done helping them then he must leave his house. In this way, Nao and Jijiro say goodbye after an awkward conversation. During the night, Yu Arasaka has a dream where he and his sister walk in the company of a boy, but he doesn't have the slightest idea who he is. The next day, Yu Arasaka prepares to attend his new academy and puts on his uniform. At that moment, Ayumi reminds him that he should bring the lunch that she prepared for him, although he does not like the idea very much, since today's menu is tortilla with rice and will probably be repeated throughout the week. Once at the institute, Nao and Jijiro welcome him and explain some things to him regarding the place. To begin with, not all students possess supernatural abilities, but despite this, they have the possibility of acquiring one over time or showing small signs of their development. Therefore, it is mandatory to attend school in both cases, because in the past, some neuroscientists used some people as test subjects for their experiments. Furthermore, if they discover that someone has special abilities, their life could be negatively affected. Even so, Yu Arasaka believes that this situation may be exaggerated, but now confesses that his older brother suffered the consequences. So to prevent this from happening, a certain individual created a system that protects them. However, Yu Arasaka demands them, since he does not want to join the student council against his will. For this reason, Nao informs him that the committee assigned him a special mission, whose purpose is to find more people with supernatural abilities and provide them with protection. Although, Yu Arasaka is not very convinced in offering his help, so Nao mentions that he will have an adequate reward if he manages to meet his goal. In a change of scene, Yu Arasaka appears before his class with his typical arrogant personality. However, he realizes that Nao and Jijiro will be his new classmates and is clearly disappointed. Eventually, Yu Arasaka observes Nao while listening to music with his headphones, and wonders how she can be the president of the student council when she is so young. From what Jijiro explains to him, that his age does not determine his position on the committee, since it is more important to be active and use your special abilities responsibly. During lunchtime, both boys decide to go to the cafeteria, but the place is quite full, and the lines are very long. Therefore, Jijiro uses his ability to obtain 2 sandwiches, but by not controlling his power, he causes a whiplash that lifts all the students up at once. However, he appears behind Yu Arasaka, who is worried when he sees his face covered in blood, although the boy reassures him, since he wears armor under his uniform to minimize injuries. However, Yu Arasaka thinks that Jijiro is quite clumsy for believing that this is an appropriate strategy to avoid injuries. While they both have lunch, they talk about Nao and her ability to become invisible to the person attacking. There, Jijiro tells him that this defect was the cause of his current situation, since as a result of this, she lost all her friends and the rest of the students hate her. However, he reveals that before entering high school, he was a completely different person. Suddenly, Nao interrupts them and informs them that his collaborator has arrived. For this reason, they must attend the council room immediately. Once there, Yu Arasaka is surprised by the number of documents and files stored in the room. At that moment, a completely wet boy appears and with a drop of water he points to a place on the map, and then mention a special power known as psychic photography ability, and without giving more details he leaves the room. Upon hearing this, Yu Arasaka gets confused and asks, "Who is he?" Then, Jijiro tells him that his name is Takedo Kumagami, a collaborator who can locate people with special powers. On the other hand, Nao notices that this boy pointed to Namba High School. In this way, they head to the place to investigate who has those superhuman abilities. There, Yu Arasaka observes how his new companions act and thinks that they are lunatics. After this, Nao informs him that she found someone suspicious and asks him to take over his body to check his belongings. Next, they manage to locate the boy, but he realizes and starts running. However, Yu Arasaka manages to change bodies and throws all his things on the ground, but its effect quickly fades. So Jijiro decides to tackle the suspect so that he does not escape. After this, Now finds two photographs of a girl in underwear, and realizes that it is a mental photograph. However, the boy tells him that he bought the photos, but does not want to reveal the identity of the seller. For this reason, Now threatens to expose him as a pervert if he does not give them the name of the person with the photographic ability. So the young man is forced to confess that this person is called Yudu, and is a second-year student. In a scene change, Now finds the student with the special ability in an archery club. There, he mentions that he knows everything about his illegal sale of implied photographs and his superhuman powers. After this, he asks for an explanation about his true intentions to misuse his psychic photography ability. So Yudu explains that he is just trying to make easy money. Because of this, Now asks him if his family has financial problems, since his parents will not be happy to know his secret. Consequently, Yudu raises a photographic paper and warns him that he projected his body in underwear. Therefore, he threatens to reveal its content if she continues with her harassment. In addition, he confesses that his parents are sick. For this reason, they sell the photographs, with the purpose of obtaining extra income that can save their lives. On the other hand, Now doesn't worry about Yudu exposing her underwear photos, since he feels that he does not have any special attribute that attracts the attention of boys. However, Yudu tells her that she is quite attractive, something that clearly makes our loli happy, and she begins to celebrate because this is the first time she has received a compliment. At that moment, Arisaka enters Yudu's body and manipulates him to give the photograph to Now. After the transition, Yudu is confused by what just happened. Then, he threatens Now with shooting her with an arrow so that she will leave him alone and forget about the situation with the implied photographs. As a result, she becomes enraged and berates him for not having the spirit of a martial artist, which causes Yudu to shoot his arrow directly at his face. But luckily, Jijiro activates his power and moves at full speed to stop the arrow before it can hurt Now. After this, she warns him about the neuroscientists, and tells him that he will lose his powers when he passes puberty. Therefore, he recommends that you look for another type of honest work before it is too late. Upon hearing this, Yudu falls to his knees and begins to cry. Later, Arisaka asks Now what happened to his brother, so she looks him in the eyes and tells him that they can visit him the next morning so he can discover it on his own. The next day, they both meet at school and head to the train station, where Now gets excited to find a beef tongue stew. While they are on their way, Arisaka feels ashamed, since he considers that it is disrespectful to eat inside the subway. However, this doesn't matter to Now, as we see her quite happy enjoying her lunch. Later, they take a bus and he begins to tell him the story of his brother. It is then when he reveals that his brother was the first of the two to develop a special ability. Immediately afterwards, we are shown through a memory a little Now happy to be accepted into a school associated with the university. At that time, her mother was proud to have a future doctor, as was her brother, a cheerful boy named Kazuki, who had a great talent for music, since many record companies wanted to work with his group. Even though they were both totally different, they used to have good chemistry with each other. But unfortunately, bad luck soon knocked on his door, since their mother decided to send them to a boarding school, where they could better develop their talents. That news angered Kazuki, since he had his own plans for the future. But that day he saw his mother beg for the first time in his life and he had no choice but to accept. Some time later Now managed to adapt quickly to his new school, where he formed new friends. However, every day she was forced to undergo different physical examinations, something that clearly seemed very strange to him. Furthermore, she could never see her brother, and when she tried to look for him, her friends always stopped her. Meanwhile, Kazuki was used as a guinea pig in the midst of different experiments to discover his supernatural nature, since his ability consisted of making the air vibrate at will. Because he used his power during a concert with his band to manipulate the sound of his guitar was found by scientists, who believed that their power was used to interfere with communications or intercept radio waves. After a year, Now was finally able to see her brother, but he was no longer the same happy boy she knew in the past, as she became a gloomy and traumatized person, who did not even recognize her as her younger sister. As time passed, Now realized that her new friends were fakes prepared by the neuroscientists, and the main reason why they examined his body daily was because he could possibly also develop special abilities. Therefore, he swore that he would never trust anyone again and ran away from that horrible place. Hearing this, Arisaka wants to know what happened after his tragic experience, so she answers him that she finally met the only person she can trust. Then, before he can find out who it is, Now interrupts him and tells him that they are already at the place where his brother is. Once inside the psychiatric hospital, they both go to Now's brother's room, and after opening the door to his bedroom, Arisaka is shocked to see Kazuki's schizophrenic behavior, who screams loudly and breaks the pillows with great fury. However, now explains to Yu Arasaka that this is the new strategy that his brother uses to compose music, since Kazuki tries to play the guitar with the pillows and his grunts are the theme tune. Later, we see Kazuki calmer thanks to the sedatives that the nurses injected him. After this, now decides to take him for a walk along the trail so he can observe the landscape and get some air. While they contemplate nature, Yu Arasaka asks him how he was able to find a place as beautiful as this, so she replies that all this is the work of the only person she can trust, since thanks to this guardian angel, his brother was able to enter a psychiatric hospital completely free of charge. However, he quickly becomes discouraged when he sees that Kazuki does not react to the beauty of the landscape, but Yu Arasaka tells him that perhaps one day, doctors will find a cure for his mental condition. Despite this, now stops him and makes him understand reality, since no one investigates to save patients like his brother, since scientists only see these people as batteries, since if one runs out, they can replace it with another more useful one. After talking for a while, they both head back home on the bus. There, Yu Arasaka feels quite bad for her and tries to console her, but now responds that she does not need his false sympathy. After arriving home, Ayumi greets him, clearly furious at his delay, but Yu Arasaka explains that this is because he was very busy with the work of the student council. Upon hearing this, his sister is excited by his performance and offers him to eat a special curry. Meanwhile, Yu Arasaka is worried that Ayumi has a superhuman ability, since he doesn't want her to end up like now, or at worst, like Kazuki. After this, they both begin to eat, but Yu Arasaka feels nauseous when he tastes how sweet the curry was, since obviously, the special ingredient is pizza sauce. During the night, Ayumi is excited to see some long orbiting comets in the sky. He also explains to his brother that these usually happen once every 100 years, something that clearly surprises Yu Arasaka, and he observes the starry sky in amazement. The next day, Ayumi prepares an omelet with rice for lunch again, but Yu Arasaka refuses to bring the bento to his school, with the excuse that other classmates do not bring food and only meet to talk. However, she insists that he take it anyway, and to his surprise writes an encouraging message with sauce for him. However, Yu Arasaka feels embarrassed and spreads the sauce on the tortilla before entering the classroom. He then meets up with Jijiro and they decide to have lunch together at the cafe to take advantage of the limited beef tongue curry. In this way, once again Yu Arasaka does not eat the lunch that his sister prepared with so much love for him, and even begins to enjoy curry even though initially its taste was very unpleasant. At that moment, Jijiro receives a call and informs Yu Arasaka that another person with supernatural abilities was found. Immediately afterwards, they head to the student council room. Once there, Takedo once again enters the room completely wet, and again points with a drop of water to a place on the map. Furthermore, he states that the special power of this new suspect is the invocation, so now explains that this is the spiritual ability to invoke the deceased in the body of another person. In other words, the suspect they must hunt is a medium. Despite this, Takedo reveals that he also possesses ignition. Hearing this, our group is surprised, since this is the first time they have received a report from a guy with two abilities, therefore, now suggests acting quickly, and they leave to locate this person with superhuman abilities. Later, they arrive at an alley in the center of the city, and after a brief inspection they deduce that their suspect is being harassed, since now finds evidence of a chase in the alley. In addition, several footprints of different sizes. After speaking with a witness, they discover that the name of the person they are looking for is Yusa Nishimori. Who is it? A teenage celebrity known as Yusa and member of a band called Hello Hello. On the other hand, Jijiro is excited to hear this news, since he is a big fan of the band, and he gives you a brief summary of their history. However, Yu Arasaka and now do not care about his otaku hobbies and ask him to concentrate on research. In this way, they begin to search for information in their public profiles, but at that moment, now notices a suspicious-looking person watching them from a nearby sidewalk. For this reason, they run after him, but the guy waits for them and surprises them with an attack with which he manages to knock out now. Next, Yu Arasaka takes over his body to stop his escape, and Jijiro attacks him with his super speed. As a result, Yu Arasaka is the one who receives the damage, and after returning to his body he complains about this improvised plan. After this, now gets up, but seems to be more worried about her camcorder than about the punch she received in the face. Consequently, he threatens the subject to let him die if he does not answer his questions. So this guy reveals that he was hired by the Teiyu TV television production company to catch Yusa. After an ambulance takes the subject away, a red-haired boy approaches them and asks them why they are looking for Yusa. To this, now responds that she knows that the girl is persecuted, and although she does not know why she can help her. However, the boy does not trust her and asks her to show him that they are not enemies. It is then when Now uses her ability to become invisible. As a result, the boy leads them to the lair where Yusa is hiding, but he warns them that they are in the middle of a chaotic situation which they must discover with their own eyes. Later, they arrive at a nightclub where they meet Yusa and another boy who protects her, although to her surprise they both refer to her under the name Misei. After this, Now shows her nicest version and kindly questions the girl. To begin with, he asks her what her real name is, and the girl answers that her name is Yusa Kurobane. But his last name means black wings, and it didn't sound very like a celebrity. For this reason his production company changed it to Nishimori. After this, Now asks her if she has felt like she is not herself at times. So Yusa answers that it could be a symptom of narcolepsy, since lately he falls asleep suddenly and when he wakes up he finds himself in a different place. On the other hand, his doctors think it is due to multiple personality disorder. However, Now reassures her and explains that her condition is not due to a mental disorder. After talking a little, Now tells the boys that Yusa has the ability to attract the deceased to her body. Furthermore, his body is possessed by the girl they call Misei. At that moment, the boys reveal that Misei is Yusa's older sister, who unfortunately lost his life in a traffic accident 6 months ago. At that moment, Misei manifests in Yusa's body and her eyes change color to a crimson tone. After this, he scolds his friends for telling his secret to a group of strangers. He then invokes his ignition powers and begins to burn everything around him. However, the boys calm her down and she returns to her natural state. It is then when Now deduces that Yusa does not voluntarily call her sister, but Misei takes over his body of her own free will. Furthermore, he states that it is a rare ability, which he considers as a possession dependent on genetic predisposition. In this way, he understands that Misei is the one who has the power of ignition and that Yusa has the power of invocation. But both abilities manifest depending on who is controlling the body at a given moment. Immediately afterwards, the reason why Yusa is persecuted is revealed. This is because he has in his possession the personal telephone number of a major television network producer, in which he has information about a large embezzlement of money and links with a very dangerous mafia. Despite this, the boys made the decision not to take the phone to the police, since if they just return the phone, the gangsters would not let her escape alive because she knows their secrets. On the other hand, if the phone is handed over to the police, the producer would be arrested and as a result his artistic career would end. Given this, Misei suggests completely burning the entire television network, but Now stops her and tells her that if she acts this way, the one who will pay the price will be her sister Yusa. In addition, he prefers to work as a team and return threats to the criminal gang to set a trap for them. In this way, Now affirms that she is a specialist in creating plans with threats and asks Misei to trust her, so she accepts his proposal and mentions that she loves his attitude. With that, he leaves Yusa's body, and she wakes up bewildered without knowing anything of what happened previously. Now then puts her plan into action and mentions that they need to go to a professional clothing store to get fire-resistant clothing. Later, Yusa turns on the phone and arranges a meeting with the producer and the criminal gang. When he goes to meet him, the producer threatens Yusa and demands that he return the phone. Furthermore, he affirms that his artistic career is about to end. Upon hearing this, Misei manifests and activates her fire powers to burn the bodyguards, while explaining that he plans to eliminate anyone who gets in his way of achieving success. Simultaneously, Arisaka takes over the body of a bodyguard and stabs himself in the leg, while Jijiro uses his super speed to collide with the body of another subject. At the same time, Now uses her invisibility to hit the producer and pretend that it is an attack from Yusa. After this, the producer gives up and begs her to spare his life. So Misei gives him the phone back, but she threatens him, telling him that there will not be a second chance. So she asks him to disappear from her life and never bother her again. Later, Misei thanks our heroes for saving her sister's life, but now asks her to move to the Hashinaumi school, since if the scientists catch her she will not have a normal life again. Furthermore, she reveals that her school and the associated apartment building are the safest place for her. Upon hearing this, one of the boys mentions that if Yusa loses her power they will never be able to see Misei again, while the red-haired boy, who is actually called Shu, is against losing his friend. However, Now reminds her that she is dead and Misei is just the manifestation of her soul in Yusa's body. For this reason, Shu asks them for a moment alone to express his feelings. He then confesses that he is in love with Misei, but regrets not having been sincere when she was still alive. Furthermore, it is revealed to us that he was involved in the accident where Misei lost her life, since he was the driver of the moped in the fatal accident. For this reason, he feels guilty and feels a shame that has tormented him since the day he left. However, Misa responds that she herself sought to feel the adrenaline of speed. Therefore, you should not carry the memory of a dead person. So she asks you to forget about her and continue with your life one day at a time. Upon hearing this, Shu begins to cry and accepts that he must turn the page and forget about the sad moments to remember Mass with joy. After an emotional goodbye, the group of friends say goodbye and separate their paths forever. Finally, Yuata returns home and Ayumi gets angry with him for being late again. But her anger dissipates after he tells her that he was busy with his work in the student council. After sharing dinner together, Ayumi entertains herself while watching Yusa on TV. So Yuata accidentally reveals to her that she will be transferring to his school the next day. Upon learning this, Ayumi is surprised and asks him if he can meet her. So Yuata answers that it may be possible. As a result, Ayumi gets so excited that she ends up getting a nosebleed from her happiness. The next day, Yuata wakes up again with a breakfast full of the Atasaka family's secret pizza sauce, and as he takes a bite of the French toast, his eyes water at the obvious sweet touch. However, he decides to eat everything at once so as not to hurt his younger sister's feelings, while he thinks of some idea to get rid of the jar with the secret sauce that causes him so much disgust. Later at school, Sweet Yusa introduces herself to her new classmates, who are surprised by their adorable presence, since the simple fact of having a celebrity in their living room seems great to them. Although the other students are envious of her sitting next to Nao and think it's a waste, since Nao is hated by her classmates except for Yuata and Jijiro, for being a cold and not at all nice person. Later, we notice that Yusa is surrounded by her new companions, where one of them dares to ask for your email. Consequently, a great discussion breaks out among all his admirers, so Yusa quickly intervenes to stop the fight. To do this, start singing a relaxation song to promote friendship and calm group tensions. Meanwhile, Jijiro explains to Yuata that this song comes from a series of spells popular among his fans, which aims to extend the well-being and good behavior of its fandom to avoid toxicity. At that moment, Nao interrupts them and warns them about a new report of a person with superhuman abilities. Therefore, he asks Yusa to meet them in the student council room. Once there, Jijiro proudly mentions to Yusa that he is his biggest lifelong fan, and that he has seen all of his shows, which impresses the girl, but clearly embarrasses Yuata, seeing that his friend is a terrible fanboy. Suddenly, Takedo enters the room with his typical wet appearance, and points out that his new discovery has the special ability of telekinesis. Having said this, he leaves the room and a scared Yusa asks them what the hell just happened. In this way, Yuata explains what we have already seen before. Following this, Nao realizes that he already knows the identity of the subject with the supernatural abilities. It is then when he shows them the photo of a young boy in the sports section of the newspaper, since he has been keeping an eye on his new target for a long time, who uses his power to cheat and win all his baseball games. Likewise, he shows them a video that he recorded a few days ago, where we can clearly see that the subject manipulates his pitches. However, he warns them that they must stop it before the Kashin classification begins, given that it is a large-scale sporting event that can put the integrity of the young person at risk if it is discovered by scientists. In a change of scene, our group heads to the baseball fields, where we meet Arifumi Fukuyama, who is a student at Kanai Academy. At that moment, Nao decides to be direct and tells him that she is aware that he uses his secret ability to win matches. However, the boy feigns dementia and denies it, so Nao warns him that his power will disappear when puberty ends, and unfortunately he will not have a professional career based on cheating. In addition, using your ability in public only puts your life at risk. That said, I suggest you stop using your special powers. Even so, Arifumi thinks that everything he says is just ridiculous. However, Nao asks him to stare at her for a few seconds and she automatically disappears before his eyes. For this reason, Arifumi is surprised. In the same way, Misa manifests in Yusa's body and demonstrates her fiery ability. However, Nao reminds him that he should not show his powers in public places, so the Yandere girl spits on the ground and Jijiro gets confused, since he doesn't know if it's Yusa's saliva or Misae's. Finally, they decide to hold a baseball game between both academies within the Hashinaumi school. In this way, they bet that if Yuata win, Arifumi must follow their orders and stop using his special abilities, but otherwise, they promise to stop bothering the boy so he can continue with his life as he pleases. While our group leaves, Arisaka wants to know how they intend to defeat the opposing team. Since Arifumi is capable of throwing a perfect knuckleball thanks to his telekinesis, therefore, now answers that they must use their superhuman abilities to win the match. Although by this, he refers to the members of the student council, because the baseball players on his academy team do not possess any special powers that can help them win. Upon hearing this, Arisaka loses his composure, since he does not know how to play baseball and he understood that it is not allowed to use his skills in this way. So now explains to him that when playing inside the school no one runs the risk of being caught by the scientists. In this way, they can avoid any scandal if they use their special powers to gain an advantage against the opposing team. Some time later, the decisive day finally arrives and both teams prepare to start the baseball game. But before starting, we see Arifumi's best friend called Takato, who wonders why they should compete against another school. Given this, Arifumi explains that it is necessary to keep his future intact. On the other hand, now encourages her team and warns them that if they lose, she must spank each one's butt with her bat as punishment. After this, the baseball match between both teams begins. Over the course of the game, the Kanai Academy team completely surpasses the Hashinaumi team. Because of this, Nao and his group are forced to start using their superhuman abilities, so that Arisaka takes over the opposing batters so that they cannot hit any pitch, even though everything is going as it should. Their plan fails thanks to Takato, since he manages to steal a base from home to score a run that puts Kanai Academy ahead. Following this, we enter the bottom of the 9th inning, with Jijiro's turn at bat, who manages to bunt the ball and sacrifices his body by using his ability to reach first base in less than a second. As a result, he crashes into the stadium wall and ends up unconscious. Despite the confusion of the referees, Now shows them a slow motion recording where it is clearly seen that Jijiro touched the base. Therefore, the referees validate the play, although they do not stop thinking that something strange happened on the field of play. Next, it is Yusa's turn to bat, but Misa manifests in her body and takes her place, which results in an excellent idea, since she is a very good athlete, but unfortunately, he has the strength of his sister Yusa, who does not have the same sporting ability. However, he manages to get a hit with which he reaches first base. Seeing this, Now is surprised, so much so that he compares her to the professional player Akiro, in reference to the Japanese baseball player Akiro Suzuki, who managed to break several records in the major leagues, and is considered one of the best in the sport. After this, Arisaka asks Now what he plans to do in his turn at bat, so she explains to him that she will make an effort to get a sacrificial touch, with which he hopes to drive runners towards third and second base, with the purpose of Arisaka becoming the hero of the match if he manages to hit the ball on his turn. However, Arisaka reminds him that his ability is not useful for hitting, but Now suggests that he play fair for once in his life, despite being the great scammer of the entrance exams. With that said, Now prepares for his turn at bat, and achieves his goal of a sacrifice bunt to position his runners at third and second base. Immediately afterwards, it is Arisaka's turn to define the encounter, since the game is 1-0 in favor of Kanai Academy. In the bottom of the 9th inning and with 2 outs in the count, which means that everything depends on a good performance by Arisaka to win the game. However, Arisaka fails his first 2 attempts to hit the ball, but he quickly recovered and finally managed to make an impact, although he did so on 3 consecutive occasions under foul's line. Therefore, everything is defined in the next attempt until Arifumi decides to move the ball in another way with his telekinesis. With this, it prevents Arisaka from being able to bat correctly, and we can consider everything lost. However, Now frantically shouts that the game is not over yet, since Takato, who is the catcher of the opposing team, could not catch the very complicated throw of his friend Arifumi. As a result, both Misa and the third base runner manage to steal the bases and score 2 runs, winning the game. Seeing this, Arifumi becomes disappointed, while Takato looks at him sadly. On the other hand, we see Arisaka happy with the victory. However, he himself questions whether he should feel joy about this situation. After this, Now emphasizes to Arifumi that he must not use his powers from now on. However, he explains that he is just an ordinary pitcher, but on the other hand, Takato is different, since he deserves to be the center of attention, since both have been companions forever, and even though his friend is aware that his school's team is very bad, he decided to play with it anyway. For this reason, I wanted to see him succeed in Major League Baseball, even if that means using his skill and cheating to achieve his goal of turning his friend into a world star. Upon hearing this, Now confesses that like him, his team also cheated to win the match. However, in the outside world there are people who know how to recognize talent. For this reason they suggest you play honestly, because with this, one day he will be able to feel proud and support his best friend in his dream of playing in the big leagues. With that, Arifumi thanks her for advice and leaves to cheer on his team. At that moment, now asks Yu Arasaka to do an experiment and asks him to take over Arifumi's body. By doing so, Yu Arasaka wakes up again in his body, with his face a few centimeters from Nao's chest, something that clearly baffles him. But he avoids the embarrassing moment and asks if he discovered something. However, Nao tells him that she is not sure and mentions that she should keep an eye on Arifumi for a while. During the night, Yu Arasaka walks back home, while asking the gods to please have no pizza sauce for dinner. Unfortunately for him, Ayumi greets him with a broccoli stew filled with the Arasaka family's secret sauce. As a result, Yu Arasaka becomes disappointed. But at that moment, he watches an interview of Yusa on television that quickly catches the attention of little Ayumi, who feels proud that her favorite celebrity is in the same room as her brother, so much so that he once again ends up with a nosebleed. The next day at school, Yusa is the center of attention among her classmates for the interview the day before. But at that moment, a group of girls take advantage of the distraction and drag Nao out of the classroom. However, Yu Arasaka realizes this, and although Jijiro asks him not to get involved, he decides to follow them to see what they are up to. What she discovers is not pleasant at all, since Nao is subjected and mistreated by this group of girls, who violently beat her in the name of other students at school. While observing the beating, Yu Arasaka mentions that he is not surprised by this type of retaliation, since Nao is a very direct girl with her thoughts and has many enemies because of her way of being. After this, the girls leave and Yu Arasaka tries to help Nao, but she stops him and indifferently tells him that if he just observes how they beat her, then he doesn't have to worry. With that, he changes the subject and informs you that a new person with special abilities appeared in the city. Immediately afterwards, they head to the council room and Yusa is alarmed by the obvious traces of abuse on his body. It is then that Nao confesses that she received a beating, and that she is used to this happening. At that moment, Misa shows up and tells him that she plans to take revenge against the girls who harass her, but Nao calms her down and asks her not to get involved, otherwise it will cause more problems than she already has. Later, Takedo enters the room and interrupts their conversation. In this way, he points to a place on the map and mentions that his power is levitation. Upon hearing this news, Nao regains her energy and shows them a magazine article, in which it is told about a supposed flying humanoid that was seen in some mountains near the city. Therefore, he suggests looking for supplies in a supermarket before setting off in search of your next objective. Next, Yu Arasaka and Nao do the shopping, while they discuss amicably about their plan to have a barbecue, with the purpose of attracting the attention of the flying humanoid. At that moment, Yusa realizes that they both get along very well and asks Jijiro if they are a couple, but he responds that although both have only known each other for a very short time, it is pleasant for him to see them together. Finally, our group takes a taxi and heads to the camp on the outskirts of the city. Upon arriving there, they begin to set up a tent and the grill for their barbecue. However, Yu Arasaka accidentally trips over an underground well into which he almost falls, so now assumes the responsibility of covering the hole to turn it into a safe space for them. Later, Yu Arasaka contacts his sister to let her know that he is in the middle of a school trip with the student council. Suddenly, Ayumi starts panting and he gets worried, but she tells him that everything is fine and hangs up. At that moment, Misa invokes her ignition powers and lights the grill, and then enjoy a banquet consisting of sausages, ribs, and roasted corn. While they eat, Yusa returns to her body and Yu Arasaka asks her what Misa was like when she was alive. So she reveals to them that her sister had a life totally opposite to hers, since normally none of the boys in her neighborhood could confront her. Therefore, she was greatly feared and respected by everyone. However, with Yusa he always turned out to be a very good and adorable person. For this reason, she has always felt safe in her sister's company. Upon hearing this, Yu Arasaka understands his feelings and lowers his gaze. During the night, our group is distracted while playing the console and forgetting the main purpose of their excursion. At that moment, Yu Arasaka realizes that Nao is not present, so he decides to go look for her. Finally, he finds her sitting on the edge of a cliff and asks her what kind of music she listens to all the time. To this, Nao responds that it is a band called Jind, and that it is his brother Kazuki's favorite group. Next, Yu Arasaka asks him if he can also listen to him and now shares his headphones with him. It is then when Yu Arasaka is surprised and has the impression that he has heard this music in the past. Then, He tells now that he felt a strange sensation, which he associates with being alone in a very large place. Upon hearing this, now smiles and assures him that that's what it's all about. Since Jean's music transmits a feeling of loneliness, this is because the band's vocalist lost sight in both eyes. For this reason, he feels that the image of a non-existent landscape can extend to infinity. In addition, he dreams of recording a music video or a documentary about Jean one day. After this, Yu Arasaka reflects that he had never seen Now act in such a friendly way. But his attitude gives you a very pleasant feeling of warmth. Immediately afterwards, Now gives him his player so that he can listen to this music at special moments, and asks him to accept this gift as payment for his work on the student council, so Yu Arasaka happily accepts it. Later, both return to the camp and Now orders them to take guard in pairs every 4 hours to monitor the area. In this way, she and Yusa take the first round, while Yu Arasaka and Jijiro rest. Later, Yu Arasaka falls asleep while listening to Jean's music, and he has a dream from his childhood where he shares a meal with his little sister Ayumi, and another boy contemporary to him. However, before he can remember who this other boy is, Jijiro and Now wake him up to take their turn on guard. As a result, Yu Arasaka laments while wondering who that boy is. Later, the group has fun fishing for trout in the river and then shares a delicious lunch outdoors. At that moment, Yu Arasaka reflects that perhaps this excursion is just a distraction method to share more time together. On the other hand, Yusa asks Now if they are going to spend another night at the camp. This is because he intends to take a shower, so Now responds that he has it resolved, and takes her to a remote place to take a bath while she makes sure the boys don't spy on her. During the night, Yu Arasaka and Jijiro do the same and take a shower in the river. It is then, when Yu Arasaka realizes that Jijiro has a muscular body that he hides daily under his class uniform. To this, Jijiro responds that it is due to his superhuman ability, since he had to train his body not to get hurt when he loses control with his faulty power. Furthermore, he suggests Yu Arasaka train his body in view of what may happen in the future. However, he refuses and tells him that he does not need it, since his ability is so useless that it only allows him to possess a foreign body for a period of 5 seconds. Upon hearing this, Jijiro tries to change his mind, but quickly stops and mentions that it doesn't matter, so Yu Arasaka asks him if he cares about him. In this way, Jijiro responds that although he tries to hide his personality under a naive mask, he has realized that he has a problem with women. Therefore, he will be free to build romances or loves when he passes puberty and his ability disappears, meaning he can still make mistakes and learn about his special power for at least a couple more years. In a change of scene, our group meets at the camp and discusses their plan to find their target. However, Yu Arasaka reminds Now that they must go back to class and that he has a younger sister whom he must take care of. For this reason, he asks him to leave the mission to return home, but Now tells him that he cannot leave, since in their opinion, there is very little left for the flying humanoid to appear before them. The next day, our group cooks corn for breakfast. Suddenly, a boy named Sato interrupts them and asks them what they are doing. Given this, Now lies to him and makes him believe that after escaping from home he met these boys at the camp. Furthermore, they plan to stay there for a long time so as not to be discovered by their parents. Upon hearing this, Sato threatens to call the police, but Now stops him and assures him that this land is private property. Therefore, he is also an accomplice to their invasion if he decides to betray them. Having said this, he shows him the article in the magazine where the flying humanoid is exposed and accuses him of being him. But the boy flatly denies it and tells her that she is crazy. However, Now provokes him to the point where Sato approaches her to snatch her video camera. Consequently, he falls into the hole that she initially promised to plug. But just a moment later, Sato flies into the air, and upon landing he begins a struggle with Now to take the camera from her. Finally, he manages to snatch the object from him and leaves with a great jump, so Yu Arasaka takes over his body to not let him escape. Consequently, he is forced to control the levitation ability so as not to get hurt when hitting the ground. And after swapping their bodies again, Now approaches Sato and questions him. There, he reveals that he also has superhuman abilities. However, these powers are considered a disease that only occurs during puberty, and then disappears. Furthermore, he confesses that if scientists discover his ability, he will be kidnapped as an experimental subject to test his studies. Therefore, he suggests that you not risk your life anymore and stop using your abilities. Upon hearing this, Sato tells him that he always thought he was the only being with a special power. For this reason, he began to dream of being able to fly through the air, and change his name to Sky High to become a famous Hollywood actor. At that moment, Yu Arasaka thinks that his plan is stupid and that his nickname is too ugly. but now understands his feelings and encourages him. In this way, Sato promises not to use his powers again and to keep his life out of danger. During the night, Yu Arasaka returns home with his younger sister, and for the first time, Ayumi welcomes him with a meal that is not made from the Arasaka family's secret pizza sauce. This is because his last jar was gone and he couldn't buy the ingredients to make more sauce. While they are eating, Ayumi coughs again and Yu Arasaka asks her if she is okay. However, the little girl changes the subject and tells him that a boy in her class suddenly confessed his love for her. At this, Yu Arasaka is surprised, but quickly calms down after Ayumi reveals that she rejected him politely. Despite this, she coughs again and Yu Arasaka takes her temperature. After discovering that his temperature is 37 degrees, he orders him to take a bath and rest for the rest of the night. After this, he takes her to her room and says goodbye to her so she can rest. The next day, Yu Arasaka goes to his sister's room to examine her state of health. However, when measuring his temperature, he realizes that he has a fever of 38.5 degrees. Therefore, it tells you that you should stay in bed to rest until you feel better and to avoid her unnecessary worries. She calls the school to report that her sister cannot attend classes. In a scene change, we see the attendance roll being taken in Ayumi's classroom. There, one of his companions and possible love interest is very worried about his absence, while another student observes him in detail with a gloomy expression on her face. Back at Hoshinaumi Academy, our group of boys enjoys their lunch in the student council room, when suddenly, Takedo enters and quickly points at the map. In addition, he mentions that the special ability of his next target is the landslide. Upon hearing this, Yu Arasaka does not understand what he means, so now deduces that it is some power of destruction. On the other hand, Jijiro realizes that the location indicated on the map is in the same apartment block as the school, which turns out to be very strange, because no adult possesses special abilities. This means that a student at school is sick and could not attend classes. Upon knowing this, Yu Arasaka looks up in fear, and now demands an answer as to why he reacts this way. Having said this, Yu Arasaka reveals to them that his younger sister has a fever and stayed home to rest. Because of this, now is surprised, since his theory about genetics indicates that two brothers can develop different abilities. It is then that Yu Arasaka remembers what happened to his brother Kazuki and worries more about it. However, now tells him that they are not scientists to know, so they must go to his house to check if it is true. Although initially, Yu Arasaka thinks that an unexpected visit could worsen his sister's health, and even more so, if a lowly lover like Jijiro accompanies them. On the other hand, he thinks that Ayumi is a fan of Yusa and this can excite her, so now guesses his thoughts and sends Jijiro flying through the window of the council room, and then call an ambulance to provide him with medical attention. In this way they manage to get rid of him and go to Yu Arasaka's house. On the way, the girls suggest eating together, but Yu Arasaka is not very excited about the idea. Given this, Yusa comments that after separating from her parents she feels very alone at home, while now points out that she is used to living alone. Upon hearing this, Yu Arasaka thinks that she is not the only one to experience this feeling of loneliness, since she remembers, when now mentioned to her, that she would never trust anyone else again. Therefore, she must understand this feeling well, since her parents sold her to scientists, and this is the reason why now stopped trusting people. However, he feels lucky to have his sister, because in his eyes now's life is too sad, so he agrees to have dinner with the girls, to offer them both this moment that they cannot have with their families. After buying some things, they finally arrive at her apartment, and before entering, Yu Arasaka asks Yusa to be discreet with Ayumi, since his sister is a big fan of hello and a very energetic afternoon can affect her health. For this reason, Yusa disguises herself with sunglasses and a mask so that she cannot be recognized with the naked eye. After this, Yu Arasaka enters the apartment to look for Ayumi, but realizes that she has visitors. As he heads to his room, he discovers that 3 of his classmates are present. It is then when we meet Nomura, Oikawa and Kanishi, who are 3 of his new friends from school. At that moment, Oikawa begins to flatter Yu Arasaka, but Nomura stops him and asks him not to be a bootlicker, since Ayumi rejected him previously, and even if she kisses Yu Arasaka's feet, she doesn't plan to change her mind. In this way, Yu Arasaka realizes who the boy is who is in love with his sister. Next, the boys say goodbye. However, Yu Arasaka notices that Kanishi looks at Ayumi in a very strange way. But before he can say anything, now bursts into the room and Kanishi leaves the house. After introducing herself, Ayumi mistakes now and thinks she is her brother's girlfriend. but they both tell her that it is not like that. At that moment, Yusa enters the room and Ayumi realizes that it is her favorite celebrity. Therefore, his disguise didn't work at all, and Ayumi gets so excited, she ends up with a terrible nosebleed that she can't control. Later, they share a nice dinner together, but after eating Yusa receives a call from her manager and has to say goodbye. On the other hand, now demands that Yu Arasaka wash the dishes, while she grabs him by his shirt and complains about him being a lazy good-for-nothing. In this way, both are in charge of cleaning, while Ayumi looks at them with a mischievous smile and hints that they make a nice couple. During the night, Ayumi takes her medicine and lies in bed. But before going to sleep, she tells them that the night before she had a nightmare. For this reason, she is afraid of falling asleep again. Hearing this, now becomes curious and asks him what kind of dream he had. However, Yu Arasaka stops her and asks her to ask about these things, since her sister does not want to remember a nightmare. Despite this, now agrees with him and says goodbye to little Ayumi so she can rest. Once outside the apartment, Yu Arasaka and now talk about Ayumi's dreams, since now believes that this can give them a clue about the ability to collapse. But Yu Arasaka emphasizes that they still have no proof that his sister has said power. For this reason, now asks him to investigate and not allow his sister to leave the house while she continues to have a fever, since they must be very cautious in a situation like this. Back in Ayumi's room, Yu Arasaka complies with Nao's request. There, his sister tells him that he can only remember many cracks in the ground, which separate each other, to which Yu Arasaka responds, if he is not afraid of his nightmares coming true. But Ayumi tells him that she does not believe in these spiritual things. The next day, Yu Arasaka meets with his friends to talk about his sister and the great possibility that she has the ability to landslide. Despite this, now wants to investigate further before giving a final verdict. Therefore, he suggests that Ayumi stay home and not attend school anymore until they can get more information. To her surprise, the next morning Ayumi is completely healthy, but according to his plan, Yu Arasaka asks him to rest a couple more days until he can rule out any serious illness. However, Ayumi disagrees and complains about being stuck at home. For this reason, he decides to escape from the apartments and heads to school. In a scene change, Yu Arasaka and Jijiro have lunch together and talk about how Nao threw him out the window. At that moment, they receive a text message and are summoned to appear at the student council room. Upon arriving, Nao reprimands them for being late, and also informs them that Ayumi is at her school at this very moment. Also, he mentions that he has a bad feeling and suggests acting quickly to find Ayumi before something bad happens. Simultaneously, we see how a mysterious girl gets out of a vehicle and runs towards the school. At the same time, Ayumi runs into Oikawa in the hallway, and he insists on inviting her to a candy store to celebrate her return. That's when Nomura intervenes and tackles the boy to stop him from harassing her friend. After this, Ayumi thanks him for his help and continues on her way to the classroom. Meanwhile, Yu Arasaka and his friends try to jump over a metal fence that serves as a shortcut to get to his sister's school. But in a change of scene, Ayumi meets her partner Kanishi. There, we notice that the girl is very angry, since Ayumi has stolen the attention of the boy she likes. In this way, she expresses that Oikawa forgot about her since she entered school. Consequently, he takes a cutter out of his pocket and begins to walk slowly towards her. Seeing this, Ayumi tries to calm her down, but Kanishi does not listen to her words. Therefore, he decides to escape from it. But when he reaches the main door, it is locked, because of how clearly terrified Ayumi begins to scream for help, while Kanishi gets closer and closer to her. At that moment, the building begins to shake and Ayumi finally awakens her special ability. As a result, the advantages are broken, and the ground collapses under their feet. But unfortunately, Ayumi is trapped in the rubble. After this, we can see the face of the mysterious girl, who regrets being late to avoid this accident. Next, Yu Arasaka observes the destruction of the building and runs quickly to look for his sister among the rubble. However, a pillar collapses on him and crushes his body. Some time later, Yu Arasaka wakes up in the medical room of a hospital and, remembering the previous events, asks about his sister. Unfortunately, the doctor informs him that Ayumi lost her life. Upon hearing this, something breaks inside him and an absolute silence takes over his life. Subsequently, little Ayumi's burial takes place in a completely empty wake room. There, his mother consoles him and tells him that he has to move forward for the memory of his sister, because although it was a very sudden accident, only the help of time can solve the problems of your life, although there are other things that time cannot repair. But he says this in reference to his relationship with Yu Arasaka. Having said this, the mother says goodbye and Yuatasaka returns home completely destroyed, while remembering the last moments he spent in the company of Ayumi. However, his will is broken and he begins to cry for being a terrible older brother. Additionally, he feels like he never did anything for his sister, but now it's too late to turn back time and make amends. As the days go by, Yuatasaka locks himself in his apartment and becomes a recluse. In this way, he stops attending school and feeds himself only with the instant noodles that his uncle gave him during the move, until one day, he receives a visit from Jijiro and Yusa, who, worried about him, invite him to dinner. However, Yuatasaka refuses to receive them and asks them to leave, so Misa shows up and asks Jijiro to break down the door. But this one mentions that his ability does not work to go through walls, and on the other hand they cannot burn the door either. Therefore, they decide to return home and give Yuatasaka more time to assimilate his loss. Later, he receives a visit from Yumi Shiranagi, who asks the janitor for help to open his apartment. There, she tells him that she plans to save his life just as he did for her in the past. In addition, he suggests going to the coffee shop that they both visited during their first date. However, Yuatasaka is not willing to leave his house and demands that he buy more instant noodles for him. At this, Yumi tells him that a healthy person does not live this way, which means this is proof that Yuatasaka is mentally ill. Consequently, he becomes angry with her and yells at her that he does not need her compassion. In addition, he throws the containers of his noodles in her face and then asks him to leave his house. In this way, Yumi understands that she can't do anything to save Yuatasaka from his depression and leaves in silence. The next day, Yuatasaka discovers that he has no more instant noodles left, so he finally decides to go shopping. But at that moment, the apartment concierge and 2 security guards knock on his door. It is then when Yuatasaka realizes that they have come to remove him by force to admit him as a psychiatric patient. For this reason, he uses his ability to get rid of the guards and then escapes from the academy apartments. He then withdraws all his savings and takes a train to hide in another city. On the way, he mentions that he plans to flee as far as possible so that Takedo does not detect him with his special ability. After arriving in an unknown city, Yuatasaka tries to survive on pizza and junk food, while staying in an internet cafe that functions as a hotel. But as time goes by, he begins to get bored of being confined within 4 walls, so he decides to take a walk around the area. However, his mental stability begins to get worse and worse, and becomes obsessed with a zombie video game in a city arcade where he begins to spend his savings. In one of his frequent visits to the game room, he discovers that the console where he usually plays is occupied by some gang members, so his patience runs out and he confronts the criminals so that they leave the place. As a result, the leader of the gang asks his henchmen to restrain Yuatasaka and then take him to an underground alley under the train tracks where they plan to beat him as punishment. However, Yuatasaka mocks them and boasts that they will never be able to defeat him. Immediately afterwards, he seizes the body of the bandits and begins a fight between them, in which he knocks out one of the criminals and stabs the other guy's arm with the leader's knife. Finally, he takes over the boss's body and makes him brutally crash against the wall, and then use the chopsticks of his sandwich to pierce the criminal's legs. Furthermore, he warns him that if he challenges him again, the next time he will have no mercy and will end his life. Having said this, Yuatasaka begins to laugh madly and leaves the subway. While walking through the city, he encounters another group of gang members, who ask him if it was him who finished off Gondo and his henchmen. Upon hearing this, Yuatasaka responds that he would undoubtedly remember a name as ridiculous as that. So the leader of these guys introduces himself as Hosoyamada and asks him to remember his name. However, Yuatasaka makes fun of him and assures him that he plans to forget his name in a couple of minutes. Given this, Hosoyamada appreciates his bravery, but orders his accomplices to teach Yuatasaka a lesson for being so mouthy. Unfortunately for him, he uses his superhuman abilities to take over the body of the bullies. In this way, he eliminates each of them one by one, and then stabs Hosoyamada in the leg. After this, he takes him by the head and threatens to take out his eyes so that they call him by a nickname more interesting than his stupid name. Consequently, Hosoyamada panics and begs Yuatasaka for mercy, while the rest of the bandits observe with surprise that their leader was defeated by a child. Next, Yuatasaka feels invincible and repeats these battles in each neighborhood of the city. In this way, he manages to defeat all the gang members in the area, and when he runs out of rivals, he reflects that real-life fights are more fun than those in video games. The next day, Yuatasaka continues looking for bandits to fight with them. It is then when after a battle he steals a box of illicit substances from one of the criminals. As a result, Yu Arasaka thinks he had a brilliant idea, and during the night he goes to a parking lot to consume the substances. Fortunately for him, just at that moment now appears and kicks that harmful dust away from him. Immediately afterwards, Yu Arasaka is surprised and asks him since when he has observed him. So now reveals that she has been by his side since his sister's death, but he used his ability to make himself invisible before Yu Arasaka's eyes. Furthermore, he tells him that he intervened at this precise moment to prevent him from making the worst mistake of his life, since if he tries these substances, there will be no way back for him. Upon hearing this, Yu Arasaka asks her if someone sent her to watch him, however, now responds that she does it on her own because she feels guilty about her sister's accident. Since it is questioned if I made the right decision in trying to shelter Ayumi in a safe place, she says this in reference to the fact that thanks to her, Yu Arasaka and his sister moved to a new school, but everything turned out to be a disaster. For this reason, now made the decision to stay by Yu Arasaka's side until he regains his sanity. However, Yu Arasaka gets up and holds her by the shirt, while yelling at her not to get involved in his life. Given this, now asks him if he wants to be trash and stop being human. Therefore, she suggests a deal, which consists of trying a bite of a special dish prepared by her, and then swear that they will never have any kind of contact with each other again. Upon hearing this, Yu Arasaka accepts his proposal, and they both head to Jijiro's parents' house. Once there, now asks Yu Arasaka to watch television while she prepares dinner. In this way, Yu Arasaka lies down on the couch, but before falling asleep, he mistakes Nao's silhouette for that of his younger sister. Later, Nao wakes him up to try the omelet with rice that she prepared for him. When doing so, Yu Arasaka discovers that this omelet tastes just like the one Ayumi prepared for him. Furthermore, he asks how he could achieve such a similar flavor, so Nao responds that he borrowed his mother's cookbook, in which Ayumi would have marked her brother's favorite dish with a drawing of a flower. Also, he reveals that since her mother abandoned her, Ayumi replicated the same dish after seeing the recipe. As a result, Yu Arasaka remembers that the last omelet and rice that his sister prepared for him, it was the one that out of shame he did not want to eat. For this reason, he decides to eat Nao's omelet as if it were one prepared by Ayumi. After finishing, Yu Arasaka asks Nao what he should do from now on, so she suggests he return to the student council. However, Yu Arasaka reminds him of his oath to never cross their paths again, but Nao responds that the deal consisted of a bite. But since Yu Arasaka ate the entire tortilla, then his oath is no longer valid. Upon hearing this, Yu Arasaka smiles and thanks him for caring about him. Additionally, he agrees to return to the school and the student council. The next day, Yu Arasaka feels motivated to move forward. Therefore, he says goodbye to his sister's portrait to honor her memory and returns to the academy. Upon arrival, Yusa and Jijiro are happy to see him and welcome him, since in this way, the entire student council is present. Furthermore, Yusa sings one of her magic spells to him so that everything goes well from now on, which clearly excites Jijiro and the rest of the students. And although Yu Arasaka is not used to this kind of rituals, he appreciates the intention of his friends. Also, consider asking Yumi Shirayanagi for an apology for acting like a jerk when she came to visit him. On the other hand, Yusa informs her classmates that she finally has the music video for her new single, which causes an endless celebration in the classroom. Later, Jijiro asks Yu Arasaka to accompany him to the cafe, and as is customary, he uses his power to obtain a good portion of the special dish of the day. Consequently, he ends up with his head bruised and covered in blood. But Yu Arasaka laughs and appreciates his friend's kind gesture. However, they receive a call from Nao and have to eat their lunch quickly. Despite this, they fail to make it to the meeting on time and Nao gets angry with them. Then, he announces that they will be the first to see Yusa's music video. Upon hearing this, Jijiro becomes excited and begins to act euphorically, in such a way that he ends up petrified after watching the video. Next, Nao gives his final verdict and proceeds to comment that the video for his song was not bad at all. As a result, Yusa is excited to get a positive compliment from the fearsome president, but Nao threatens to change her score if she starts acting unbearable in front of her. After this, Jijiro asks them to watch the video again, and after a few minutes, Yu Arasaka realizes that Takedo has not yet arrived at the meeting. Given this, Nao mentions to them that their psychic will not show up today, since in reality, he called them to ask them for a personal favor, since he needs a companion for the concert of his favorite band Jeaned. However, none of the boys have knowledge about his music, so Yusa and Jijiro reject the invitation, but they both volunteer Yu Arasaka, who who gets completely nervous and demands to ask Masae's opinion, since she may be a fan of post-rock due to her personality. It is then when Mass manifests itself, and comments that you can attend the concert if you listen to a super high-speed radiator with double flow of 260 pulses per minute. Unfortunately for her, now refuses to attend the concert in her company. Thus, Yu Arasaka is the only remaining option, but he is not very sure about going, given that his current situation is not the most favorable, although now makes him understand that people need to take a break from time to time. So finally, Yu Arasaka accepts the proposal. In a change of scene, while walking back home, Yu Arasaka meets a blind woman, and upon hearing her British accent, he realizes that she may be the vocalist of La Bandagine. For this reason, he decides to draw your attention to check it. However, the woman quickly approaches him and asks for his help to get to a place where she can eat Madaniyaki. It is then that Yu Arasaka corrects her terms, since he deduces that she is referring to okonomiyaki with yakisoba noodles. Therefore, he suggests eating a variant called Hiroshima yaki, which is usually sold in any restaurant in the city, so the girl immediately accepts, since her desire is to eat something that has traditional Japanese noodles. Once at the bar, the girl orders her food and a mug of beer. At that moment, Yu Arasaka remembers that no one is waiting for him at home. Therefore, he requests a second order accompanied by iced tea. After a short time, the cook brings the order to their table to see if they want to cook it themselves. But Yu Arasaka answers no due to the condition of the woman who accompanies him, in addition to the fact that he clearly does not know how to cook. For this reason, he asks the cook to take charge of the preparations. It is then when the man discovers that his favorite celebrity is in his restaurant. In this way, the woman introduces herself as Sala Shane, vocalist of La Bandagine. After this, the cook begs him for an autograph, while telling him that he plans to attend his concert. Therefore, Sala agrees to sign his name on a sheet of paper. Upon seeing this, Yu Arasaka is surprised, since despite being blind, she can write very well and without difficulties. Following this, Sala tries the Hiroshima yaki and mentions that the dough is too thin, but she feels happy to enjoy a delicious dish of Japanese culture. After finishing their lunch, they both leave the place, but before saying goodbye, she asks him if anything bad happened in his life recently, since she can feel a strong sadness in his aura, which she associates with a feeling of tragedy. For this reason, he asks if he lost someone important in his life. Upon hearing this, Yu Arasaka feels ashamed and responds that he got everything right in an impressive way. So Sala asks him to tell her about his tragic experience. Having said that, they both head to a nearby park and Yu Arasaka tells him about his sister's accident. After learning the story, Sala reacts with helplessness, since she did not think her story was so sad. Consequently, he asks Yu Arasaka to allow him to make an offering and pray for the soul of his younger sister. Upon arriving home, Sala recites her prayers for Ayumi's rest, and Yu Arasaka asks him a favor, since he needs him to meet someone special. After this, they both have a coffee and he tells him the story of Nao and her brother Kazuki, so Sala deduces that they are not simple fans. That is why Yu Arasaka asks him for a few minutes to communicate with Nao. While making the call, Nao responds that she is not interested in meeting Sala, since although he likes their music, buys their records and attends their concerts, he does not feel any other special bond with the band. Upon hearing this, Yu Arasaka feels that she is not sincere with her emotions. Therefore, he makes a rather peculiar proposal of which they do not give us more details at the moment. Back at the apartment, Yu Arasaka apologizes to Sala, since Nao cannot come to his house. On the other hand, you want to know what time you should return to your hotel. So Sala responds that he has all the time in the world and agrees to accompany Yu Arasaka to his next destination. On the way, Yu Arasaka checks his phone to warn Ayumi not to come home early for dinner. However, he remembers that his sister is no longer here and sighs sadly. At that moment, Sala feels his energy and wants to know if something triggered the memory of his sister, which surprises Yu Arasaka, due to his incredible ability to feel the vibrations of his body. Finally, they both take a train and Sala tells him that she is hungry. Therefore, they decide to take a break so she can have dinner. After this, they both arrive at a fast food stand, and Sala is surprised by the deliciousness of a bowl of noodles with crickets. He also mentions that Japanese food is the best of all, while Yu Arasaka observes her with surprise, since he is so used to typical food that he does not feel that it is special. After a few hours, both continue their trip aboard a bus. At that moment, Yu Arasaka asks her if she is really blind, since when she signs the autographs, it does not seem that she was born without sight. Given this, Sala confirms that she is not blind from birth, but her case is due to a penance to atone for her sins. After this, he proceeds to say that in the past he always dreamed of leading his own musical group. But when he wanted to realize it, life slipped out of his hands and his dream never came true, because he did not know how to sing or play the guitar. But on the other hand, other people his age managed to be successful and obtained recognition. For this reason, he began to hate God. However, everything changed when he began to cheat and immersed himself in a dark world full of greed. In this way, he managed to be very popular in Japan until reaching immense amounts of money. However, the look of his public changed from bad to worse, which caused problems in his family, given that they kidnapped his younger brother to ask for an absurd ransom in exchange for his freedom. For this reason, she made the decision to leave everything and become the lead singer of a small group. To do this, he had to give up his sight, and ends his story with the name Jean. Upon hearing this, Yu Arasaka does not understand what he is trying to say, so Sala exclaims that he is referring to God. Furthermore, he assures him that when his time comes to make the right decisions, he will understand the hidden message in his story, and by then, Sala hopes that Yu Arasaka will be able to choose his path well. Next, they arrive at the psychiatric hospital and Yu Arasaka apologizes to her for making her walk so much. It is then that Sala deduces that Yu Arasaka has not always been a kind person. Furthermore, he suggests that this change is due to a really special person for him. Upon hearing this, Yu Arasaka agrees with him and can only think that the reason for his change is now. At that moment, the proposal he made previously is revealed to us, since Yu Arasaka asks now for permission to take Sala with his brother Kazuki, since he is his biggest fan and this meeting can help him regain his sanity. And even though Nao was unsure of this, she granted him her permission, without the hope of a positive change. However, he is very curious about Yu Arasaka's insistence, but he only mentions that he has a hunch, while he thinks that his old self would never have done something so compassionate for another person. In a change of scene, Yu Arasaka prepares Sala, since he does not know what condition Kazuki is in at the moment. After this, they proceed to enter his room and we see the boy scream and break the pillows again. Despite this, Sala begins to sing a song from his album called Fallen. As a result, he manages to calm Kazuki's anger and allows him to come to his senses, since he manages to remember his sister's name. It is then that Yu Arasaka is moved and thanks Sala for waking up Kazuki. Later on the bus back home, they both feel happy about the success of their visit to the psychiatric hospital. There, Yu Arasaka tells him that he plans to attend his next concert, so Sala promises that he will dedicate his songs to the girl he likes so much. Consequently, Yu Arasaka finally recognizes that he managed to change his way of being thanks to Nao. After saying goodbye, Yu Arasaka receives a call from Nao, since she found out from the nurses about Kazuki's emotional change. Therefore, she thanks him for making such a wonderful decision, since this is the first time in years that her brother has recognized her. In addition, he reminds him that both of them must attend the concert together. Therefore, Yu Arasaka confirms that he does not plan to lose it for anything in the world. Finally, upon arriving home, Yu Arasaka listens to Jin's music and asks himself why he feels so homesick. The next day, Yu Arasaka prepares to attend the concert, and before leaving his house he says goodbye to Ayumi's portrait. Later, he meets Nao and is surprised by how attractive she looks. After this, he asks if it is not too soon for the concert to start, so she answers that she wants to buy some exclusive products from the band. With that said, they head to one of the stores to buy a case for their phone. But upon arriving, they discover a huge line to access it. So upon seeing this, Yu Arasaka prefers not to enter, but now holds his hand and demands that he come with her, since he doesn't have time to deal with the stalkers who usually approach pretty girls asking if they have partners. For this reason, Yu Arasaka wonders what Nao's intentions are, since she is supposed to hate him. At that moment, he looks at the poster with the name of the band and something catches his attention. However, Nao interrupts him and assures him that Jind is a super popular group around the world. It is then when Yu Arasaka remembers everything that happened the day before and thinks that Sala is really fantastic. Later, Nao manages to buy the case for his phone and celebrates it as if it were his greatest treasure. Finally, they go to the auditorium and take their seats to enjoy the concert. There, Sala performs his best songs in the company of his band, but during the recital, Yu Arasaka feels a strange sensation through his body. So, Sala communicates that the next song is a new premiere that was born in his beloved Japan, which is called Getio. Immediately afterwards, he begins to sing the unreleased song, but Yu Arasaka feels that he has heard this song before. However, he does not understand how it can be possible if it is a premiere. Then, his mind becomes cloudy, and he begins to observe confusing scenes from his past. Consequently, he suffers an emotional breakdown and lets out a scream of agony. As a result, Yu Arasaka has a sudden memory, where we see him in the company of his sister Ayumi in the facilities of a neurological center. There, Yu Arasaka mentions that Jin's songs are impressive and promises to never forget Gitio's song. On the other hand, Ayumi answers that Holo Hilo is the best band in the world. After this, an alarm interrupts them and signals that it is lunchtime. But before heading to the cafeteria, Yu Arasaka meets a scientist named Sageguchi, who tells him that classical music is the best of all, since it is like a mathematical formula. After this, the old man asks him about his younger sister and feels sorry for her. In this way, Yu Arasaka reflects that there are researchers who really feel empathy for them, in reference to all the teenagers who are held captive in the center while they are studied for their supernatural abilities. Next, Yu Arasaka asks him what he is doing in this place, so the old man responds that he is an eccentric who bothers the researchers who make fun of his hypothesis. It is then when he mentions the geocentric theory, which is an astronomical investigation that places the Earth at the center of the universe, and the stars revolving around it. Furthermore, he explains that right now it may seem like a strange theory, but at the time it was normal to maintain this idea. However, the reality was very different, and the first person who objected to this theory was expelled as a heretic. As a result, he was unable to continue his research, and this is the same thing happening with Sageguchi right now. Later, Yu Arasaka goes to the cafeteria with his sister and mentions that they are going to give them drugs again to accelerate their superhuman abilities. After this, Ayumi comments that she wishes her brother Shun could accompany them. However, Yu Arasaka asks him to remain silent, since Shun's ability is the time skip and can attract a lot of attention. Also, he mentions that because of this power, he is now locked in a high-security room. Later, they both sit down to eat, and Yu Arasaka notices the taste of drugs in the food. He then reveals that he has kept his true ability hidden, since scientists still believe that his power is to possess people for 5 seconds. Therefore, he must hide his true power, or else he may lose his freedom, just like what happened to his brother Shun. At that moment, Takedo sits behind him and asks him to be silent. Having said this, he confesses that he found a subject with telepathy. Furthermore, it is revealed to us that Takedo works as an assistant for the neurological center against his will. He then explains that the telepath has the ability to send and receive messages. However, he was captured by scientists. Therefore, he asks Yu Arasaka to take over the body of a subject behind his back with the pulverize ability, and upon returning to his body, he gives him a note with the whereabouts of the telepath. Furthermore, he mentions that Yu Arasaka is his only hope, and if he fails, both he and the rest of the internees will lose their lives. In a change of scene, we see 3 boys named Midamori, Shichino and Madoki. The latter is the mysterious girl who tried to prevent Ayumi's death in the accident, but unfortunately arrived late. There, they comment that they have been waiting for this moment for a long time, and they put their hopes in Yu Arasaka to escape from this center. Also, they explain that they must use their abilities at the right time to be able to change the current world. Back at the cafe, the guards demand that Takedo return to work. Seeing this, Ayumi asks Yu Arasaka why is he treated differently from the rest. Therefore, he clarifies that Takedo has a fabulous ability, although he is not at Shun's level. Later, Yu Arasaka and Ayumi undergo an MRI, and at the end of an alarm it tells them that everyone must return to their rooms, except for the summoned subjects. At that moment, Ayumi remembers that she received a summons from the scientists, and a group of guards are coming for her. However, Yu Arasaka feels that this is very strange and is opposed to leaving his sister alone. However, he receives an electric shock and loses consciousness. Later, he wakes up to the movement of an earthquake and starts banging on the door while having a bad feeling. It is then when Sageguchi, covered in blood, opens the door and reveals that the scientists used the force to awaken Ayumi's ability called collapse. As a result, Block D of the medical center was closed due to extensive destruction, but Ayumi was locked up to be executed and later dissected due to her dangerous ability. For this reason, he encourages Yu Arasaka to act quickly and save his sister's life before it is too late. In addition, he mentions that he must use his authentic skill, since this is the most powerful skill of all, which is called theft and allows Yu Arasaka to steal the special abilities of other users. Having said this, Yu Arasaka gathers courage and runs to save his sister's life. On the other hand, Sageguchi looks at a security camera and comments that he is also going to lose his life to help Yu Arasaka. Meanwhile, he runs through the medical center in search of the telepath, until finally, she manages to find him in a shielded room and proceeds to steal his ability to read minds. Next, Midamori and Madoki join in and help Yu Arasaka continue on his way. There, it is revealed to us that Midamori has the ability to erase memories, but to do so he must touch the person. On the other hand, Madoki possesses the hypnotism ability to induce sleep in his targets. When this happens, their eyes turn white and glow brightly. Eventually, Yu Arasaka uses telepathy to communicate with his brother Shun and discover where he is isolated. After doing so, he informs her that they are going to dissect Ayumi because she has an ability that can destroy the medical facility. Therefore, he plans to rescue him so that Shun can change the world with a time jump. At that moment, the lights go out and a carbon monoxide chemical begins to gush from the pipes in the hallways. Consequently, Yu Arasaka begins to weaken, but fortunately for him, Shichino enters the scene to help him. There, he asks him to steal his ability, since he has the power of intangibility, which allows it to cross any surface of solid matter. However, the use of this causes a great state of exhaustion. Having said that, Yu Arasaka steals his ability and begins to go through the walls to get closer to his brother. But unfortunately, Shichino is shot down by the security guards. After hearing the shots, Yu Arasaka apologizes and mentions that Shun can change the world. So he starts running and manages to cross all the walls until he finally reaches the room where Shun is. There, Yu Arasaka unties him and Shun tells him that he has to leave immediately to save the future of all the teenagers with special abilities. Having said this, he invokes his power and in his eyes you can see how he returns in time. After this, the guards enter the room and execute Yu Arasaka. Back in the present, Yu Arasaka abruptly wakes up with a panicked scream that scares Now. After this, she mentions that she is in a hospital because she fainted during Jin's concert. Consequently, Yu Arasaka remembers that his sister lost her life and feels that everything he previously remembered is a nightmare. However, he questions his memories, since Ayumi mentioned to him several times that she felt that there was a third member in her family. It is then when Takedo enters the room and asks him if he was finally able to remember his past. Seeing this, Now is surprised and asks who he is, so Takedo tells him that he is the one who has the ability to detect special abilities. Furthermore, he throws his hair over his face so that she can identify him. As a result, Now discovers that he is her fellow council member and mentions that Siko is quite handsome, since we usually tend to see him completely wet. Immediately afterwards, Yu Arasaka reveals his presence in the dream and asks him if he knows his brother, so Takedo reassures him and tells him that this is the reason for his visit. In addition, he promises that he plans to rescue his sister Ayumi. Upon hearing this, Yu Arasaka gets angry and asks him how he can save someone who is already dead. Therefore, Takedo reminds him of his brother Shun's ability, but before acting, they must meet with him. At that moment, Now offers them her help, since she hasn't seen Shun for a long time. But Yu Arasaka asks him how he knows his brother, so Now reveals that Shun is the person who helped her when her brother Kazuki became disabled. In this way, we understand that Shun is the only person Now trusts, and Yu Arasaka remembers the conversation they both had when they were on the bus on the way to the psychiatric hospital when he met Kazuki. After this, our group leaves the hospital and boards a vehicle that takes them to the outskirts of the city. Upon reaching his destination, Takedo activates a secret passage hidden in the mountain, while explaining that this is a facility for the study of superhuman abilities. Upon hearing this, Yu Arasaka thinks that it is a trap, but Takedo asks him to shut his mouth and continue on his way. Finally, they access a room where Yu Arasaka meets his brother Shunsuke Arasaka, who gives him a cold welcome, because Yu Arasaka does not remember him. Therefore, Takedo reveals to us that Yu Arasaka is progressively recovering the memories that were erased from him. Upon hearing this, Now asks him for an explanation, but Shun interrupts her and asks if it is his little friend who is visiting him. At that moment, Yu Arasaka realizes that his brother is blind, and Shun tells him that if he doesn't feel like a hug in the middle of this moving reunion. However, Yu Arasaka responds that he is very confused and has many questions, so he makes the decision to tell them everything that happened during this long time trip. From this point, Shun guides Yu Arasaka through his own story. In this way, he tells him how he managed to escape from the neuroscientists, who were chasing them thanks to a 3-year time jump. So with this, we head back in time, just before we were captured by the scientists. At that time, he took the opportunity to look for allies and thus made the decision to start a friendship with Takedo. After this, he discovers that his new friend has already recruited a small group of children with special abilities. However, Shun recognizes them instantly, since he already knows them due to the time skip. Then, He tells them the truth about the future and confesses that he already knows each one's special ability. To begin with, Shachino can pass through walls, but is easily exhausted when using his power. On the other hand, Madoki has the ability of hypnotism to put a person to sleep, but as a side effect, she also falls asleep after activating her ability. And finally Midamori, who manages to erase people's memories. Although he must be in physical contact with his target, he also needs time to find the source of his memories. Finally, the boys believe their version of the story and understand the tragic future that awaits them. Therefore, he proposes to them a specific plan that he planned in advance during his time jump, which consists of bringing together all users with superhuman abilities to defend themselves against neuroscientists. However, being just children, every time they tried to recruit more allies, they unfortunately failed. For this reason, Shun suggests that the children request the help of an adult. But this idea clearly does not please the rest of the boys. However, Takedo explains to them that they can trust the adults who during their puberty also develop special abilities. Upon hearing this, the group accepts the proposal and Shun begins to plan a plan to help them save their future. Finally, when he turned 15, Shun had the brilliant idea of going back in time to win the lottery and raise funds. In this way, they can create a strong and secure organization that allows them to fight against the neurological center. So after telling them his plan, he says goodbye to the boys and activates his power to jump through time. As a result, he returns 3 years into the past again, but realizes that with each trip his vision begins to deteriorate, since his ability makes him rewind his entire life through his eyes, and as a consequence, you will not be able to use this power in the future if you lose your vision completely. In addition, they still cannot overcome the tactics of the investigators. For this reason, you need to find a safe place where everyone can take shelter. After many trips in time, Shun turns 15 again and Yuatasaka asks him about his plans for high school. That question manages to inspire the idea of traveling to the past to found a school that is dedicated to protecting children with powers. Although he is aware that this is his last chance and after this he will lose his sight forever, however, he is willing to sacrifice his vision and his special ability for the sake of his friends and family. So after saying goodbye to Takedo, he makes his last jump in time and remains blind forever. Since then, he began his last path in darkness with the support of his best friend and the other boys in his group, until finally, he managed to found a school for children with special powers. However, he had to give up his daily life and his family. For this reason, I request Takedo to use Madoki's power to erase the memories of his brothers, in addition, to form more organizations like this throughout Japan. In this way, Takedo accepts their requests, but mentions that he runs the risk of scientists being able to recognize his face. Upon hearing this, Shun suggests she let her hair down so that it hides her face. It is then when Takedo adds a special touch to the use of his ability and takes a vase to wet his hair. In this way, it creates its characteristic wet dog look and this becomes a graceful symbol of loyalty and sacrifice. Some time later, Shun and his group arrive home ready to use their abilities against their brothers. It is then when Madoki puts them to sleep with his power and Midamori makes them forget all their memories together, since this is the only way to protect them and ensure an almost normal life without worries in the future. After this, his story concludes and Shun feels great relief after confessing the truth to Yuatasaka. He then apologizes to Nao for not being able to save Kazuki, but she calms him down and gives him the news that his brother is beginning to progressively recover. Meanwhile, Yuatasaka is shocked by his brother's sacrifice and everything he had to endure to keep them safe. At that moment, Shun explains that there is still something to do, since they both must prevent Ayumi's death. Although Yuatasaka does not have the slightest idea how to do it, since his brother's power stopped working when he lost his sight. However, Shun points out that he can use his true power to steal his time jump ability. After this, it is revealed to us that Nao and Takedo were aware of Yuatasaka's hidden ability, and through a flashback, we are shown when Takedo informed the student council members about his ability, which he calls the superpower of theft. As a result of this, Nao located Yuatasaka and asked him to transfer to the academy that his brother founded. Since then, he began to study him and assigned him different tasks to take over the body of other people with special abilities. With this, he realized that by possessing the bodies of other users he could also extract their powers, and as evidence, all the people who have been possessed by it have lost their abilities. Upon learning this, Yuatasaka becomes angry at being treated as a guinea pig for his investigations. Furthermore, knowing his true power from the beginning would have made his job easier during the missions, but now clarifies that the people he possessed needed a reason to refrain from using their powers. On the other hand, I was concerned about the risk involved in accumulating so many skills. Realizing that she is right, Arisaka tries to use the power of telekinesis, which he obtained after taking over Yumi's body during the baseball game. As a result, he manages to attract a book that hits him directly in the face and confirms his theory. On the other hand, Shun asks him to steal his ability to save Ayumi. He then explains that he must return to the day on which the collapse ability manifested, and when he completes his mission, he must visit him to update him on everything that happened, since the Shun of the past will have no memory of this meeting. Upon hearing this, Arisaka feels that he has a new opportunity to save his sister, and finally steals Shun's ability to return to the past. As a result, Arisaka travels in time and wakes up with his sister, which causes him great relief to see that she is safe and sound. After this, he goes to the academy and repeats the same day that Takedo informs them about Collapse's ability. But unlike before, this time he quickly recognizes that his sister is the next target. In addition, she decides to take only now to visit her and thus prevent Yusa from causing her any feeling of euphoria. At this, Now is surprised and agrees to his proposal. Upon arriving at the apartment, Arisaka says goodbye to Ayumi's friends. However, this time she takes a good look at the appearance of the girl who tried to hurt her with the cutter, since all these events occur exactly the same as before. Later, Now says goodbye to Ayumi and she hints again that they are a couple. Next, Arisaka accompanies Now to the door and confesses that he comes from the future. However, this does not surprise her, since she is aware that he would do anything for his sister in the middle of a dangerous situation. It is then when Arisaka reveals everything that happened in his timeline. So upon learning about the events of the future, Now offers her help to prevent Ayumi's death. In addition, it has the support of the student council. On the other hand, Arisaka tells her that thanks to her he was able to get his life back on track, since after Ayumi's death, he became desperate and almost took a path from which he would never have been able to get out without her help. At that moment, we notice a melancholic shine in Nao's eyes, but she responds that she doesn't know what he means, because he does not have any memory of the future, although he decides to believe him because of his experience with supernatural abilities. Despite this, Arisaka also acknowledges that she has not always been kind, but at the end of it all, she was always right. It is then that he thanks him for his help. However, Now simply responds coldly with "You're welcome." After saying goodbye, Arisaka meets with Ayumi and tells her that he is going to perform a spell to cure her cold. Having said that, he uses his stealing ability to take away his collapse power. As a result, Ayumi immediately feels better and Arisaka is greatly relieved to see that step 1 of his plan worked perfectly. The next day, Arisaka accompanies her to school to make sure she gets to class safely. There, he meets his fellow student council members disguised as elementary school students, except for Jijiro, who decided to dress like a teacher. On the other hand, Arisaka goes as himself to cause a great impact to Ayumi's aggressor. After this, our group infiltrates the school, and Arisaka hides in a locker while waiting for the time of the incident. But he discovers that Jijiro was discovered because his stupid disguise was not convincing at all. Additionally, he is taken to school authorities on suspicion of being a stalker. Simultaneously, the students recognize Yusa for being a celebrity and surround her. Despite this, Yusa insists that they are wrong, until Misa shows up and yells at them that she is not Yusarin. Immediately afterwards, he begins to spit at the students to prove to them that a celebrity does not behave that way. But to their misfortune, the children become more excited and plan to do something to preserve their saliva as a treasure. At the same time, the boys mistake Now for another famous celebrity. For this reason, she decides to quickly escape from the place to mislead all the children who are chasing her. And seeing the failure of his next part of the plan, Arisaka becomes disappointed and realizes that his sister's future hangs in his hands. At that moment, we see the strange girl with orange hair arrive again. But this time we know that it is Medoki. Meanwhile, Kanishi confronts Ayumi for stealing the attention of the boy she likes and threatens her with the cutter. So again, the previous events are repeated and Ayumi escapes until she reaches the door locked with a padlock. However, this time Arisaka comes out of the locker and protects his sister. In this way, he manages to scare Kanishi by using his telekinesis ability to break all the window panes. On the other hand, Now becomes invisible and cuts the girl's bangs to cause her even more panic. After this, Arisaka warns him that he will not spare his life if he tries to attack his sister again, Consequently, Kanishi begins to cry with clear trauma and leaves school. Next, Ayumi jumps into his arms and, through tears, thanks him for saving her life. There, we notice that Madoki walks away from the place when he sees that everything went well. Finally, they both walk back home, and on their way they meet Takedo and Madoki. There, Yu Arasaka reveals that he already knows them due to the memories of his future. With that said, he sets into motion the next part of his plan, and in the company of his sister and the boys he heads towards the fortress where his older brother is. Next, they arrive at the laboratory and Shun explains to his sister that for certain reasons he had to erase his memory. It is then that Yu Arasaka updates him on his latest mission and informs him that he stole his ability to save Ayumi's life. After this, Yu Arasaka asks if they can return to their normal lives. However, Shun warns him that due to his dangerous ability, Yu Arasaka can become a threat, since many people wish to use their accumulated abilities for evil. Therefore, he suggests that he remain in the fortress until his power disappears. Upon hearing this, Yu Arasaka does not feel comfortable with his request, although he is aware that this is the safest option for everyone. Next, Shun takes them to see the laboratory, and there, Yu Arasaka meets scientist Sageguchi again, who is now the head of the research team at the laboratories founded by Shun. Immediately afterwards, Sageguchi reveals to them that his staff is working to produce a vaccine that can stop superhuman abilities, since these can be described as a disease and must produce a mass cure for the entire human population. Since the origin of these capabilities come from an orbiting comet called Charlotte, which approaches the Earth every 75 years. Consequently, it drops unknown particles. As a result, all those who absorb these particles develop special powers when they reach puberty. Then, they awaken the areas where the brain nerves sleep, in which the comet particles are lodged. In this way, the abilities manifest when the infected reach the most emotional time of their lives. After this, Sageguchi tells an old story of when Comet Charlotte approached the Earth 4 centuries ago. At that time, it released a large amount of fragments into the orbit, and those who absorbed these particles became witches. For this reason, people began to fear these abilities and the so-called witch hunt began, in which tens of thousands of people were executed with these special powers. Next, Sageguchi tells us that Comet Charlotte once again assaulted the Earth's atmosphere 12 years ago, and since then, they have continually discovered thousands of young people with superhuman abilities. Given this, scientists have created a vaccine to prevent these powers from manifesting in adolescents when they reach puberty. However, the cure is only distributed in Japan under Shun's command, which means that the rest of the world is unprotected, and it is feared that a witch hunt against adolescents with special abilities will soon be repeated. Upon hearing this, Yu Arasaka selfishly states that it does not affect them, so Shun reprimands him and replies that his organization fights to protect all people with special abilities. In addition, it mentions that its vaccine is designed for those who are infected, but it has no effect on those who have already developed the disease, which means that producing a new medicine to counteract the side effects can take many years of research, and no one knows what will happen to the world later. However, Shun has the mission of protecting all the infected around him, especially Yu Arasaka and Ayumi. On the other hand, Yu Arasaka resigns and asks him to at least restore his memories in Ayumi's mind, but Shun responds that it is not possible. Also, he does not know the reason why Yu Arasaka recovered his memory, but he suggests that they start creating new memories from now on. Having said that, he proceeds to introduce himself to Ayumi as his older brother. As a result, the little girl immediately accepts it and is happy to see her family reunited. Later, Shun introduces Ayumi to the rest of his group, and they give her a demonstration of the skills that each one possesses. Seeing this, Yu Arasaka has the impression that the rest of the boys try to keep their distance from him. But Madoki interrupts his thoughts and asks him if he is jealous that Shun steals his precious little sister from him. Given this, Yu Arasaka answers no, so Madoki invites him to spend some time together and play with the rest of the boys. Next, they go to a room to play mahjong, but Yu Arasaka is a terrible player and loses too many times, so the rest of the boys make fun of him for not being as smart as his older brother. At that moment, Takedo leaves the game, because he has to return to the student council to report a new objective. That's when Yu Arasaka gets excited and asks if he can go with him, but unfortunately for him, the other boys oppose him, since he should not leave the fortress because he is in danger. After this, Yu Arasaka understands his current position, although he cannot stop thinking about now and spending time with her again. Eventually, Takedo boards the company vehicle, and notices that his driver named Furuki is clearly nervous, but when he asks, he assures him that nothing is happening. During his way, Takedo realizes that Furuki is taking him on a different route than usual, so he decides to ask him what's going on. At this, Furuki apologizes and clarifies that he must take him somewhere else, since he received a threat that puts his family at risk and has no choice but to betray Shun's organization. Later, they arrive at an abandoned factory and meet 4 people, among them, a foreign subject who uses a native to communicate with Furuki. There, he demands that he do one more thing before freeing his family. Having said this, Furuki begins to cry and asks Takedo for forgiveness, and then quickly leaves the place. The old man then sends one of his henchmen to beat Takedo until he is unconscious. Later, he wakes up clearly in pain and wonders where he is, while at the same time, he observes the subject standing in front of him and a cart with torture instruments next to him. After this, the leader demands information about the location of humans with special abilities, but the young man refuses with a smile, so he again receives a beating from the bully until he loses almost all his teeth. After this, Takedo looks up and answers that even if he loses his full set of teeth, he doesn't plan to tell them anything. However, one of the subjects takes an injector and administers a truth serum with which he loses consciousness again. Upon waking up, Takedo discovers that he was the victim of cruel torture and regrets betraying his best friend. In this way, we understand that the truth serum took effect and Takedo told them the whole truth under the effect of narcotics. Simultaneously, the subjects go to the academy departments and execute the security guards, to then break into Nao's room and kidnap her, even though she tries to resist and fight with all her might. At the same time, the criminals contact Shun to inform him about the kidnapping of Nao and Takedo. Furthermore, they affirm that although the latter is not in danger, he was left without nails and teeth due to his torture. Therefore, he suggests that you follow each of his instructions to the letter if you want to see your best friend alive again. To start, they ask him to hand over Yu Arasaka, or else both Takedo and Nao will suffer the consequences. Also, they threaten to execute Furuki's family if anything alters the fate of their plans. With that, they hang up the call, and Shun thinks about what he should do. Next, call Furuki to see how he is. It is then when he confesses that he has been threatened since the preparations to found the academy began. During all this time, Furuki thought about taking his own life so as not to betray Shun's foundation. But this meant abandoning his family and letting them also lose their lives at the hands of foreign terrorists. Therefore, he had no choice but to do everything these criminals ordered him. Upon hearing this, Shun forgives him and tells him that all this problem is due to an error in his calculations. So he decides to calm him down and promises that he will get his family back. Later, Shun meets with his team and they meditate on a plan to save everyone involved. However, they cannot jump in time, since the criminals began their blackmail before founding the academy. In other words, this can alter your routes for the future and all your fighting during the past would be meaningless. It is then when Shichino proposes to follow the bandits' instructions, since if they send only Yu Arasaka they can obtain victory thanks to their ability to steal the power of their rivals. And even if it fails, it can return to this point to try again for a proper rescue. In this way, they avoid any alteration and the bandits will not be able to notice the time jump. Hearing this, Shun agrees and trusts that his brother can fix this chaotic situation. Later, Takedo reacts and discovers that Nao is tied up in her underwear right behind him. Therefore, he begins to fight to free himself so he can help her. Back at the fortress, Shun tells Yu Arasaka about Nao's kidnapping and his plan to rescue Takedo and Furuki's family. To do this, he suggests stealing the skills of all the bandits who work for the foreign terrorist. In this way, you can disarm them and dismantle the criminal organization. However, Yu Arasaka is afraid of failing, since he does not have confidence in himself because he is a cheater. In addition, he thinks that he is a selfish and unpleasant person who only cares about his personal well-being. At that moment, his negative feelings take over and he activates the collapse ability that he previously stole from his sister. But quickly, Shun hugs him and asks him to listen to the sound of his heart, so Yu Arasaka regains his sanity and suppresses his power before causing an earthquake in the lair. After this, Shun calms him down and asks him to think calmly about what he really wants, since if something goes wrong, he just has to return to this precise moment. Finally, Yu Arasaka reflects alone while remembering the beautiful moments he shared in the company of Nao. And like her, she helped him not make the worst mistake of his life. After Ayumi's death in the past that managed to change thanks to the time jump. It is then when Yu Arasaka realizes that he is not planning to make the same mistake he made with his sister and decides to fight for Nao. Next, he informs his brother that he plans to accept the mission and receives the support of all his companions. With that said, He meets Furuki at the entrance to the fortress and he takes him to the abandoned factory where the terrorists are. Upon arrival, the subjects give Furuki a key to free his captive relatives in the back apartments. Once out of danger, Yu Arasaka takes over the body of the leader and his accomplice to disarm them and put his plan into action. However, he discovers that they do not have weapons and all this was premeditated by the group of bandits. After this, a girl with superhuman abilities enters the scene and jumps on him, while a blinding glow emerges from her mouth. Next, he takes out a dagger and cuts over his right eye, so Yu Arasaka tries to use the time jump to escape from there. Unfortunately for him, he needs the power of his two eyes to activate the ability, so he invokes the power of collapse to destroy everything. But the bandits stop him and warn him that if he destroys the factory, his two friends locked in the basement will also lose their lives. Upon hearing this, Yu Arasaka cancels the collapse and uses telekinesis to throw some metal pipes at them. But the mysterious girl lunges at him and stabs his right shoulder to prevent the death of her bosses. Consequently, Yu Arasaka unleashes enormous power with which he begins to destroy everything in his path. Simultaneously, Shun and his team arrive at the factory, only to discover that Yu Arasaka lost control of his abilities and destroyed everything around him. Quickly, they begin to search for survivors in the middle of the disaster and to their surprise they find the bandits under the rubble. Next, they find the body of Yu Arasaka and the mysterious girl. There, they notice that he used the telekinesis skill to the limit to protect the reduced space and receive less damage. However, his eye is completely shattered and they doubt he can regain the time jump ability. On the other hand, Midamori finds the bodies of Nao and Takedo, so Shun runs to see how they are. Unfortunately, he comes across a pool of blood and his best friend in deep agony. This is because he used his body as a barrier so that Nao would not receive damage during the collapse. Despite not seeing anything around him, Shun tries to hug Takedo, and upon finding his body, he says goodbye to his best friend with a joke about the nickname that Shun gave him during his childhood, which is Pooh. After this, Takedo exhales his last breath of life and Shun painfully laments while shouting to the sky. Later, Yu Arasaka wakes up in a hospital bed, clearly elated after remembering all the previous events. Consequently, it activates its power of collapse and generates a situation of chaos and destruction. Faced with this scenario, Shichino injects him with a sedative and manages to calm him down, while we see Yu Arasaka completely bound by force straps. In this way, we discover that barely 2 days have passed since the failed mission and his surgery. After this, Madoki and Midamori enter his room to check on his health. However, the girl realizes that Shichino did not clean her blood after the injection, but he replies very angrily that that is not his job. After this, Yu Arasaka wants to know what exactly happened, and also asks about Nao. It is then that Midamori points out that she is also admitted to the hospital, while Madoki assures her that she is totally safe. Upon hearing this, Yu Arasaka feels great relief, but on the other hand, he is interested in knowing what condition Takedo is in. At that moment, a cold silence echoes in the room and upon seeing the expressions on their faces he deduces that he lost his life, which causes that Shichino makes an effort with him and attributes all the blame to him for thinking only about his life and not that of his companions. However, Madoki stops him and reminds him that it was his idea to comply with the bandits' instructions and risk the time jump. Also, he reveals that his enemies gave up using his ability to travel through time. Therefore, they took the hostages in the basement to protect themselves from its collapsing power. In conclusion, he affirms that everyone made a wrong decision and cannot do anything to reverse the events. Despite this, Yu Arasaka blames himself for the outcome of the mission and asks them if more things like this are going to happen in the future. In this way, Madoki tells him that for now Midamori erased the memories of the culprits, but it is a matter of time before other evil organizations approach him. At that moment, Midamori receives a message, meaning that they must retreat. However, Yu Arasaka asks them one last question, since he wants to know why his brother did not come to see him. That caused Shichino to unleash his fury against him, because Takedo was Shun's best friend. In a scene change, we see some fragments of the funeral and Shun on the roof of a building trying to come to terms with his loss. A few hours later, Ayumi visits her brother and is surprised to see his poor physical condition after the collapse. Furthermore, he finds out that Yu Arasaka may lose sight in his right eye. Despite this, he reassures her and promises that she can lead an almost normal life thanks to rehabilitation. It is then that he decides to change the subject and asks him, what is it like to live within the facilities of Shun's foundation? So Ayumi responds that everyone is very kind to her, but she is worried because she notices that her brother Shun feels very sad and she still doesn't know the reason for his depression. Upon hearing this, Yu Arasaka reflects and feels identified with his brother's pain, since he also experienced firsthand what it is like to lose an important being like a sister, or in his case, his best friend. For this reason, he questions what Ayumi's life would be like if he had died. The next day, Yu Arasaka receives a visit from Jijiro and is happy to see a face that is not going to judge him for his actions. Next, Jijiro hands him some thermal containers, the contents of which are the delicious beef tongue curry dish. That lunch represents a beautiful memory of his school life and his pleasant moments in the student council. So Jijiro is in charge of giving him the food directly in his mouth, and Yu Arasaka feels as if he were back at the academy. After this, he asks about Nao's health and Jijiro answers that his injuries are minor. Therefore, he must be discharged soon. Upon hearing this, Yu Arasaka feels a sense of relief throughout his body, and Jijiro says goodbye, after wishing him a speedy recovery so that he can return to his work in the student council. Eventually, the next to visit him is Yusa, who prepared him her special cream stew to help him boost his energy. Said dish is the one that Yu Arasaka rejected when he felt depressed by Ayumi's death. But this time he decides to thank her for her gesture, so after trying a spoonful of his stew, he mentions that thanks to it he feels more cheerful. Next, Yu Arasaka calls Misa and she manifests herself with her typical yandere personality. There, she asks him, what does he need from a dead person? But to his surprise, Yu Arasaka wants to know where people go when they lose their lives. However, Misa does not know what to answer him, since her existence is like a balloon that Yusa constantly holds. This means that Misa depends on Yusa's ability to remain in the world of the living, and when she loses her ability, Misa will disappear from the earthly plane forever. Because of this, Yu Arasaka makes him understand that he must say goodbye to his loved ones before it is too late, since he knows what it feels like to be on the brink of death. Even so, Misa clarifies that she was not a good daughter, although losing her life has been the worst of all her pranks. For this reason, Yu Arasaka insists that he go see his parents, before Yusa finally matures and loses his ability. However, Misa only promises to take some time to think about it, since Yusa is going to regain control of her body. It is then that Yu Arasaka takes the opportunity to convince Yusa to visit her parents so that Misa can see them once again. On the other hand, Yu Arasaka, despite his current state, gathers courage and walks towards Nao's room in the hope of talking to her. But when he gets to the door, he stops because he remembers that his relationship with Nao is not very good. He also maintains his thought that she hates him. For this reason he feels ashamed and returns to his room. The next day, he watches Yusa's show on television, where she presents her parents' restaurant. There, he watches her try the different dishes of the place, each one with an expression more charming than the other. However, he discovers that in some scenes Misa takes over his sister's body and reacts coldly to the food prepared by them, although he mentions that the love of his parents turns those simple dishes into a masterpiece. As a result, he thanks them for the food while crying with happiness at meeting his parents again, while they are moved to see how their daughter's spirit is reflected in her younger sister. Furthermore, they affirm that although Misa was quite rebellious, deep down she was always a good daughter. A few days later, Yu Arasaka receives a visit from Ayumi again, but this time, she brings him a surprise gift for his 16th birthday, which is a rice omelette with the special sauce of La Familia Arasaka. So Yu Arasaka is preparing to try the mythical dish that on multiple occasions caused him displeasure. Immediately afterwards, he manages to perceive a delicious flavor and realizes that it is the same sensation that Misa talked about in that program. It is then that for the first time in his life he honestly expresses to his sister that he really likes her food. Later, Yu Arasaka performs his therapies and Medoki congratulates him on his quick recovery. However, he tells him that he needs a favor from him, since Shun needs his support. In this way, Yu Arasaka goes to the roof where his brother has been all this time. When he arrives, he asks him to allow him to talk to him, so Shun breaks his silence and tells him that the hospital is a safe place. However, he avoids touching on the topic that torments him so much. On the other hand, Yu Arasaka immediately notices that his brother suffers from the same symptoms of depression that he suffered in the past. But before he can say anything, Shun warns him that terrorist groups abroad are rising quickly, which means that they will soon arrive in Japan, and without Takedo no one will be able to prevent the appearance of new subjects with special powers. Upon hearing this, Yu Arasaka is left speechless and leaves the place. Back in his room, he meets Nao, who greets him as if nothing had happened, so he remains speechless. Next, she tells him that she received the medical discharge and that she thought about visiting him to talk to him. Therefore, he wants to know what his brother Shun told him, and he summarizes their most recent conversation. In addition, He expresses his concern about his brother's depressive state, while he tells him about his desire to be able to do something with his special abilities to destroy all his enemies. Given this, now reveals that there is a method to achieve this, although this involves great risk, since it consists of stealing the skills of all the people in the world. However, by absorbing the power of millions of teenagers, he can become a monster capable of annihilating the human race. For this reason, now confesses that she never really thought about telling him this alternative to her problems. But after seeing how he risked his life to save the people he really cares about, finally, she changed her opinion about him, since now she can see him as a person she can trust. After this, now gets up to return home and decides to give Yu Arasaka time to think about what he wants to do. Suddenly, he stops her and tells her that he will try, since he owes her a favor and this time he wants to be the one who manages to save her. In addition, he confesses his feelings, so now reacts with surprise and cannot believe what his ears hear, since she doesn't remember having done something important enough for him to fall in love with her. On the other hand, Yu Arasaka repeats to her that thanks to her he was able to get out of his deep abyss of despair, although now thinks that maybe he did it because he felt responsible for Ayumi's death, and he doesn't understand how something so terrifying could lead him to develop feelings for her. It is then, when Yu Arasaka exclaims that love cannot be explained. At this, she angrily yells at him that his argument to describe love is really stupid, so they both get angry with each other and it becomes clear that they are incompatible. Despite this, Yu Arasaka is in love with her, so now responds that she plans to wait for him to return after he saves all the people with superhuman abilities, since only then can they be a real couple, and although he has his expectations too high, he accepts his proposal with a smile. In this way, both make a promise with their little finger and Yu Arasaka tells him that he will return to his side no matter what happens. In conclusion, now opens her arms to him and assures him that she will wait for his return. In addition, he asks her to be the first to have his ability stolen. That said, Yu Arasaka takes away her power and she thanks him for returning her to her natural state. Later, Yu Arasaka tells his brother about his plan to save all the people with superhuman abilities. However, he refuses to listen to him while he blames himself for not being able to save his best friend. For this reason, Yu Arasaka assures him that his motive for stealing the abilities of others is that no one else feels unhappy again for losing a loved one. Therefore, Shun understands his purpose and offers his support to end this disease once and for all. In a scene change, both meet with the rest of the team and talk about their plan. There, Madoki asks him how he plans to locate all the people with special powers. Therefore, Shun states that the leader of the terrorist organization must have someone close to him with a power similar to Takedo's, since otherwise, they would never have managed to gather so many people in such a short period of time. For this reason, Shun suggests Yu Arasaka fly abroad to locate this person, while he and his team are in charge of maintaining peace in Japan. The next day, Yu Arasaka prepares to leave the hospital, and when he leaves his room he meets Misa and Jijiro, who already know his plan and have come to say goodbye to him. In addition, to give them their superhuman abilities. Unfortunately, this means that Misa will never be able to return to the world of the living again, which clearly produces a feeling of sadness in Yu Arasaka, but he accepts his powers and Misa says goodbye to them, although before disappearing, he writes a letter to his sister Yusa, where he tells her how happy he was to share time with her and her group in the student council. Furthermore, he confesses that he loves her more than anything in the world. After this he says goodbye forever, so Yusa cries uncontrollably when reading the letter, but she accepts her fate and is glad to know that her sister was there all this time. After this, the three hug each other and promise that their friendship will be eternal. Subsequently, Yu Arasaka packs his bags and prepares to leave to begin his last mission. However, now waits for him at the door and gives him a notebook with translations from Japanese to English. On the other hand, Yu Arasaka gives her the music player that she previously gave him, and asks her to take care of it until his return. After this, both say goodbye with a promise ahead of them, and the desire to meet again in the near future. In a scene change, Yu Arasaka boards a plane bound for Singapore, while Shun listens to the sound of takeoff. Subsequently, he lands on foreign soil and uses the notepad that now gave him to record his entry into the country. Next, walk through the streets of the city and buy a memory card with the information of other humans with abilities. However, this does not make his search easier, and he decides to find the guy who has a power similar to Takedo's. After this, he heads to an urban area in the Philippines, hoping to locate the leader of an organization of special humans. There, he uses his telekinesis ability to enter the subject's vehicle. After this, use his power of theft to remove his telepathy ability and obtain the information he seeks. It is then when he discovers that the person he needs to find is called Angelo. In this way, he gets out of the vehicle and heads to the marginal neighborhoods of the area. Upon arrival, he seizes the body of his accomplices to eliminate all the witnesses present. He then confronts Angelo and steals his power. As a result, now Arisaka has the ability to locate all people with special abilities through a map. So after a few days, he manages to strip all the infected people in Southeast Asia of their abilities. Eventually, he travels to the north of the Republic of South Africa, where he continues his assault to find and absorb all the abilities. There, he realizes that he is getting stronger and stronger. In addition, accumulating all these powers gives him great ease when fighting against infected people. However, he still has a long way to go and thousands of skills to steal. Having said that, we move towards an urban area in Egypt, where a criminal organization receives a letter with instructions to catch Arisaka. There we notice that the letter says that someone who steals skills all over the world recently appeared. Therefore, they request his immediate capture, but they must be careful with the one-eyed deaf. On the other hand, Arisaka discovers that he is a celebrity among users with special abilities. Also, he feels that his new nickname is quite ridiculous. But at that moment, he begins to feel a frozen sensation in his brain. In addition, he can freeze the things he touches with his hands. It is then when he realizes that he stopped thinking about the abilities he steals and just takes them without caring about their attributes. During the night, he contacts Shun and informs him of his progress. There, he highlights a translation skill and a power that allows him to move without sleeping. Upon hearing this, Shun encourages him to continue with his mission, but warns him not to do too many crazy things. However, Arisaka responds that he must act quickly and travel to the next country as soon as possible, since his sanity is running out. The next day, Arisaka goes to the dungeon in an unknown area and steals a dangerous ability that worsens diseases, although this seems to be useless and it is not given much importance at the moment. Later, he reaches a mountainous area in Afghanistan, and it is achieved with a military camp where children are used as weapons of war. However, something catches your attention on the map, and that is that it reveals a person isolated from the rest, so he decides to wait until nightfall to investigate what is happening. In this way, he discovers a boy who has the power to be a carrier. This means that it is a person who has the disease but does not develop any special ability. However, Arisaka cannot steal his power before he develops it, so he remembers his old conversation with Sageguchi, where he tells him that superhuman abilities are a disease. For this reason, understand that if it is a virus, then it can worsen and accelerate his gestation process. To do this, use the skill that he stole earlier in the dungeons, and begins to accelerate the illness of the carriers to make their powers manifest. By doing so, he takes away their abilities and decides to continue on his way. But this time, it seeks to eradicate all carriers who can spread the disease in the future. Later, he heads to an ancient fortress in eastern India, but upon arrival, a paramilitary group ambushes him and fires their bullets at him until they run out of ammunition. Fortunately for him, Arisaka uses an ability to summon a magical shield around him. After this, he blows up the fortress, but consequently suffers great damage and feels very exhausted from accumulating so many powers. A few days later he travels to the other end of the planet. In this way we go to a suburb in the Republic of Peru. There, he discovers that not everyone uses their abilities for evil. Since he meets a young girl with the power to cure diseases, however, he must steal her power, even though she is doing good deeds for others. After this, Arisaka thinks that perhaps he can use this new ability to heal his right eye and recover his time jump. With this, he can save Takedo's life, but before doing so, he reflects that it is a mistake, given that his mission is not designed for his personal well-being. In addition, he should not break the rules of human beings. Therefore, he points out that achieving a world without superhuman abilities is his only destiny. Later, we travel to the Republic of Cuba. There we notice that Arisaka begins his descent into madness, since by absorbing so many telepathic abilities, he begins to hear everyone's thoughts and cannot rest for a single minute. Consequently, he manifests his most destructive abilities and causes a great commotion in the city. After this, he loses his sanity and thinks that the people around him are his enemies, so he uses his abilities to try to harm them. Despite this, a small trace of lucidity takes over him. For this reason, he meditates that his purpose is to save innocent lives and not cause the suffering of other people. In a change of scene, we head to western Saudi Arabia, where Yu Arasaka rests in a small motel room. However, he cannot sleep due to his ability that allows him to move without falling asleep. Because of this, he turns to melatonin narcotics to induce a state of relaxation with which he manages to lose consciousness. The next morning, he wakes up to news about the surrender of the terrorist leader in Saudi Arabia. Since he suffered an attack during the early morning and his group was also characterized by the capture of children. At that moment, Yu Arasaka discovers that his clothes and the bed sheets are covered in blood and dirt, so he tries to remember what happened while he was sleeping. However, his memories are confusing, but we understand that he faced off against the criminal organization while taking over the skills of other teenagers. Eventually, we move to southern Italy, but Yu Arasaka's mental state is getting worse and worse, since he loses track of time and begins to move without his own will. There, he finds himself in the middle of a shootout with Italian mafiosi, but uses his skills to quickly eliminate them. After this, he looks at the notepad on the floor and remembers that he made a promise before leaving. Unfortunately, he doesn't remember who Now is and if she is an important person to him. Simultaneously, Now waits for his return alone in her room, while listening to Jean's music on her player. After this, Yu Arasaka continues his journey through Germany, Poland, Sweden and Finland. In each of these places, he steals other people's abilities and causes huge disturbances during his visits. He then traveled through Russia, France, Portugal and England, but each time, Yu Arasaka appears less human and more like a monster in search of power and dominance. After this, we embark on a tour through the United States, and in his wake, he causes enormous massacres in every city he visits. Finally, he arrives in the Arizona desert where he drags two unconscious young men after a violent battle. There we notice that Yu Arasaka feels like an omnipotent god with the desire to take over the entire world. At that moment, the notepad falls out of his pocket and he kicks it. However, he feels remorse and wonders why he has these feelings. In addition, what is the relationship he has with this object? After this, he gets up and puts Now's gift like a necklace around his neck. Later, he traveled through Siberia, Cambodia, Turkey and Australia. On his way, he fights against criminal organizations that keep children with special abilities captive in their laboratories. Furthermore, he grants them freedom after stealing their powers. Until one day, Yu Arasaka arrives in China and realizes that his trip is about to end, since there is only one person left with superhuman abilities besides him. Despite this, it has a very bad reputation due to its power to steal abilities. It is then when a hitman surprises him and shoots him 2 arrows with a crossbow with which he manages to hurt him. At that moment, a purple-haired girl stands in the hitman's way to prevent him from ending Yu Arasaka's life. However, he explains that Yu Arasaka is a very bad man who is wanted and captured all over the world. Upon hearing this, the girl responds that she doesn't care and maintains her desire to help, without caring that Yu Arasaka is a stranger to her. Consequently, the criminal shoots an arrow at him, but quickly Yu Arasaka intervenes and stops it with his telekinesis. After this, he stands up and mentions that the last skill in the world is the power of bravery. However, this is a very high-risk skill, therefore, he steals the girl's skill and asks her to return home. As a result, the girl begins to feel afraid when she sees that she is in trouble, so he decides to leave the place to seek help. Immediately afterwards, Yu Arasaka comments that his trip is over and that he must return to fulfill his promise. Suddenly, the bandit hits him again with an arrow and approaches him to execute him. But in a dramatic turn of events, Shun appears on the scene aboard a helicopter and saves his brother from certain death. Some time later, Yu Arasaka wakes up in a hospital room in the company of Now. There, she congratulates him for his work and mentions that he managed to keep his promise. However, Yu Arasaka does not remember her and asks her who she is. At this, Now deduces that stealing millions of skills took a terrible toll on his brain. But she is happy for his return and confesses that she is his girlfriend. Upon hearing this, Yu Arasaka is surprised and asks her if she wants to continue being his partner even though he doesn't remember her. So Now tells him that it is a promise he wants to keep. Having said that, he explains everything that happened before his trip. Next, Yu Arasaka looks at the notepad on the stretcher, then Now reminds him that he made it for him. In this way, Yu Arasaka reveals that this object was a very important amulet during his trip, which causes Now to feel great happiness when she sees that he was able to accompany her path unconditionally. After this, they both hold hands and Now welcomes him back home. Simultaneously, Shun, Madoki, Shichino and Midamori visit Takedo's grave and say goodbye to him. On the other hand, we noticed an altar with Misei's photo and her letter in the Kurobane family's house. At the same time, Kazuki continues his recovery in the psychiatric hospital, although he managed to find peace again thanks to Sala and the music of his band. In a change of scene, Yu Arasaka receives a medical discharge and goes in the company of his classmates from the student council and his sister to an open field surrounded by flowers. There, he tells us that he is eager to discover the new adventures that the future has in store for him. Furthermore, now responds that from this moment on their lives can only bring them happy moments. Before ending this story, I want to tell you about a special episode that takes place before Ayumi's death, in which we head to the student council room with Takedo informing his classmates about a new objective. There, he reveals to them that his special ability is the power to read hearts. Next, he leaves the room and our group of heroes prepares to visit the place indicated on the map. Along his way, Now is in charge of recording everything that happens, until he finally finds a girl with a pink hat. After this, they decide to approach her and without mincing words, Now asks her if she has the ability to read people's minds. In this way, the shy girl says yes, so Now asks her for a demonstration of her powers. Having said that, he thinks of something that the girl can read and as if it were a speaker it is revealed that his thought is, "Stupid Jijiro." Given this, the boys are surprised to see that the girl can reproduce the thoughts of the people around her. However, Now is still not convinced and asks for a second try, so he once again thinks about something else. Immediately afterwards, the girl reads his mind and transmits the following message: Jijiro is a stupid muscle man. Upon hearing this, Jijiro feels offended and complains to Now for her inappropriate thoughts. However, she takes this situation with humor and asks her friends to try to test the girl's power. To begin with, Jijiro thinks that Now is a capricious fool, but to his dismay, the girl reveals her thoughts. Consequently, Now gives him a terrifying look and grabs him by the shirt to give him a death threat. In addition, it intimidates him so that he stops listening to other people's thoughts. At that moment, the girl covers her ears and screams that she can't fit in anywhere, since she is a conflict machine that only generates arguments because of her ability. Because of this, Now distances himself and deduces that his ability has a range of 8 feet. Also, it reveals that people who enter that radius of distance can broadcast their thoughts around them. Furthermore, he feels that it is very likely that the girl is going through a very bad time with her friends and family because of her power. For this reason, she prefers to be alone before getting involved in situations that could cause problems. Following this, Jijiro mentions that he has never heard of an ability that always remains activated, so Now answers that there must be a switch that activates his power against his will. Therefore, it suggests dividing into 2 groups to find the cause of this involuntary manifestation. In this way, Yusa and Jijiro form a team, while Yu Arasaka and Now make up the next one. At that moment, Now mentions that a friendly environment can help boost this girl's confidence. For this reason, they must prove that they are a united team so that she can return to her normal life. After this, Yusa and Jijiro leave to begin their search. Meanwhile, Yu Arasaka and Now approach the girl to start a friendly conversation. However, Yu Arasaka's negative thoughts become evident, and as a result, Now kicks him in the stomach to make him stop thinking. Seeing this, the girl is surprised, but Now calms her down and assures her that it is just a joke between friends, since they both get along very well and are inseparable. However, Yu Arasaka thinks that she is a liar and her thoughts come to light. Consequently, Now kicks him again until she finally knocks him unconscious. Later, the girl believes his lies and tells him that she is hungry, so Now decides to take her to a nearby store to get to know her more closely and find a solution to her problems. As they walk, she reveals that her name is Aori Sekiguchi, and they both hold hands. Upon arriving at the store, everyone orders their food and discovers that Aori hasn't eaten for 3 days. Furthermore, they feel that her parents must be worried about her, but Aori remains silent and prefers not to answer. It is then that Now plans to gain her trust to learn her story and invites her to the amusement park to entertain the girl. Later, they arrive at the park and look for attractions to enjoy the experience. There, Yu Arasaka is terrified of getting on the rides, and although he hides it to try to look brave, his thoughts give him away, and Now discovers that he is a coward. Next, they go on a roller coaster and the girls get excited by the adrenaline of the ride. On the other hand, Yu Arasaka regrets it and with trembling legs refuses to go on another attraction. Despite this, he tries to maintain a brave boy's posture and decides to keep up with the girls, although his thoughts become increasingly darker and unpleasant due to his dislike for mechanical games. After riding different attractions, Aori feels safer and begins to call Yu Arasaka her older brother. Furthermore, He assures that he is afraid, so he thinks that he wants to hit him. But his thoughts are revealed and now hits him first so he doesn't hurt the little girl's feelings. After this, Aori thinks that they are both very funny, and they prepare to enjoy the rest of the park's attractions. Later, our group takes a break to eat some ice cream. However, Yu Arasaka and Nao have a discussion through their thoughts that catches Aori's attention, so she asks him if they are a couple, since they both seem to enjoy their fights and are synchronized when it comes to responding. Despite this, they answer no. Even so, Yu Arasaka thinks that they can really form a nice couple. Hearing what he thinks, Nao hits him and makes Aori laugh. But at that moment, the little girl gets up from her chair and bumps into a couple walking through the park. After apologizing, the boy with a hypocritical smile thinks that the girl ruined his date. Consequently, your partner listens to your thoughts and scolds you for being an immature person who has no compassion for children. In this way, the girl breaks up with the park and this guy blames Aori for causing her breakup. Because of this, Aori starts crying and runs away from the park to be alone. After this, Yu Arasaka and Nao run after her, but Aori does not want them to approach him. For this reason, Nao reveals that he also has a special power, although he makes her believe that it is the ability to not leave a girl in trouble alone. In addition, she asks him for a chance to resolve her dilemma, so Aori decides to trust her and tells her his story. To begin with, he claims that he obtained this power because he wanted it with all the strength of his heart. This is because during the past Aori had many friends to play with, especially her best friend called Hanoka. However, this girl one day made the decision to get away from her and play with other boys. For this reason, Aori searched for her repeatedly to ask her the reason for her change. But no matter how many times he insisted, she never answered him anything. Therefore, Aori wished for the power to hear his thoughts. Although before she knew what she thought, everyone around her began to argue. Suddenly, he was left without friends and subsequently ran away from home to avoid causing more problems around him. Knowing this, Nao understands that the switch that activates her power is none other than her friend Hanoka. So he offers his help to solve this problem and proposes that he spend the night at his house so that he does not sleep on the street. Later, Yu Arasaka returns home and his sister Ayumi welcomes him with a special dish made with the Arasaka family's secret sauce. Given this, Yu Arasaka thinks he should get rid of the family recipe, but he quickly covers his mouth and feels that Ayumi can hear his thoughts. Fortunately for him, Aori is not present and he is freed from an uncomfortable situation in front of his sister. At that moment, he receives a call from Nao who demands that he get his things ready to visit Aori's best friend at her house. Upon arrival, Hanoka surprises them by showing great concern for Aori. However, she refuses to be his friend again for reasons she cannot reveal. Given this, Nao tries to persuade her and tells her that she plans to use Aori to carry out illegal work. In addition, he reveals his special ability in front of her and forces Yu Arasaka to do the same so that Hanoka feels afraid. After this, the girl tells them the reason why she decided to distance herself from her best friend. It turns out that Aori has a strange incurable disease that little by little spreads to the point where she can become paralyzed. Therefore, Hanoka preferred to distance herself from her and begin to hate her, before seeing her friend lose the mobility of her limbs. Upon hearing this, Nao reacts with anger and holds her by the neck, while yelling at her that she is a stupid girl for abandoning her friend. Since Aori has been waiting for a long time for an answer to understand the reason why their friendship ended. Also, he points out that she could have acted as a good friend, and accompany Aori's destiny, instead of abandoning her at the worst moment of her life. Thus, Hanoka begins to cry and her mother leaves the house to separate her from Nao. At that moment, Yu Arasaka reflects that it is the first time he has seen Nao act in this way. But he justifies his actions out of a feeling of anger at seeing all the injustice that Aori had to endure all this time. The next day, Yu Arasaka meets with Jijiro at the academy, but avoids telling him the result of his investigation the previous afternoon. Some time later, Yu Arasaka tells us that both he and Nao go to visit Aori from time to time. On the other hand, Hanoka reconsidered after Nao's retaliation and resumed her friendship with Aori. Despite her mistakes, the little girl forgave her, since her desire is to be with her best friend. Furthermore, Yu Arasaka values the bravery with which Nao faced Aori's illness to make his days more pleasant. Finally, they both buy a bouquet of flowers and head to the hospital where Aori is hospitalized. Before entering his room, Nao tells Yu Arasaka that one day the time will come when he too will give up everything for someone else. And although we already know the outcome of this story, at least we understand that Nao always kept a small trace of hope in him. Later, they meet Aori and Hanoka in the hospital room. There, Yu Arasaka smiles after thinking about what an admirable and magnificent woman now is, although this is again revealed by Aori and now discovers that his thoughts are finally good.